So long, man. Have a good rest.
Fuck you! Help me! Taking maybe one step more. I really lost my life.
We started running and partying, and next thing I know, we're up on the stage going crazy, doing stupid stuff. And,
that's crazy.
oh, yeah, he's cutting up shirts, and I'm ripping off the Liv shirts, and the girls are upside down with their feet on the counter, and Diplo's just grinding and tearing it down, and it's just, like, insane. My ears were ringing, bro, for, like, 3 days. I went to Impact Wrestling the next night, and my boy finally smarted me because, Dad, I tried to have the earphones, but you just knocked them out of my hand. I didn't know that your ears would ring that long, you know?
Like Dr. Dre. You ever bang Dr. Dre before you go out? And
well, if you don't know, now you know. He's my man, brother. Every time, you know, you got to go back to the source of the force, you know? And Big Papa, I'm telling you what, you can turn all this new stuff on. You can be the newest wrestler. You can jump off the top rope, but back at the end of the day, it's back to the creator, brother.
Thank you, pal. The Jesus Christ of wrestling is
No,
here.
no, I'm talking about the Jesus Christ of getting real with it in the streets. You know, I'm talking about, you know, Big Papa. I'm talking much respect.
Wow.
You know, no disrespect to anybody else, but go back to Biggie if you want to get real about all this other bullshit.
It's now time for The Sit Down with Don Tony.
The Sit Down, where Don Tony talks one-on-one with his followers.
What are you looking at?
About the world of pro wrestling, pop culture, and so much more.
The Sit Down with Don Tony.
And now, your host, Don Tony.
I tell you, I thank God that some of my heroes and favorites growing up died so many years earlier. Because, you know, the one, if you asked me what's the one word that comes to your mind since you heard that Hulk Hogan had died, it's not shocked. It's not even sadness, but it's anger. Not my anger. What I have seen over the last 48 hours on social media, boy, you know, it's funny. You know, I think over the years, we've seen some tragedies. And the one that sticks out of my head, in my head, probably more than anything, was Hana Kimura. And I remember, you know, just the hate, you know, that led up to her tragic death. And I remember seeing some of the people that were the nastiest motherfuckers online saying, you know, we need to be better. We need to do better. You know, we need to forgive sometimes. We need to understand nobody is perfect. And I remember covering in real time, I said, it's a cycle. Right now, everybody's here. You'll have a little sadness. Everybody could be better. Everybody lightens up. Then you get a couple of little sarcastic jokes. Then you get a little bit more of using hate to justify hate. That's the best one. And next thing you know, you're right back in the circle. It happens over and over and over and over and over again. I have been blocked on all social media accounts from Hulk Hogan for at least 10 years. I grew up a Hulkamaniac. I became a wrestling fan in 1979, and I swear on my mother, my father, my dogs, I'm the pod father, but I'm also the dog father. All right? I don't have one thing written down tonight. This show is not just about Hulk Hogan. We're going to talk WWE, we're going to talk AEW, we're going to talk about SummerSlam, but obviously we need to open up talking about this. I grew up a Hulkamaniac, and I became a wrestling fan in 1979, and I've been doing this since 1997. If you ask me the one thing that I hate saying the most from the beginning, the one phrase that I hate saying the most to all of you out there, because I feel it's somewhat disrespectful, is this: if you didn't live through it, you'll never truly understand it. I bring it up with the Monday Night Wars. I bring it up through the early days of TNA, WWE head-to-head, which would focus on wrestling right now. And I say it with Hulkamania. The majority of the people that you see online with this ferocious hate were either not even born when Hulkamania was around, or they might have been in their diapers at most. It's a group of people, and no, it's not just AEW fans. No, it's not just this. It's a group, it's a culture. It happens in politics, it happens in entertainment, it happens in sports, it happens outside in the real world. It just so happens that when it comes to wrestling, since we're all wrestling fans, we all see it in real time together and it hits. And let me make this perfectly clear. For everyone out there that occasionally posts a tweet that gets 10,000 likes, we're all wrestling fans at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I may like what you don't like, and I may not like what you like, but at the end of the day, we're bigger, and we're wrestling fans, and we're one big family. If there was ever proof that will never be the case, it's the last couple of days. Like I said, I grew up a Hulkamaniac. Since 1997, going back to my wrestling hotline, for all of you that have been loyal to me, going back that long, you're old, but I say this with no exaggeration. My grandmother is who got me into wrestling. My grandmother, her favorite wrestler was Hulk Hogan. She died in 1991. And we put a Hulk Hogan figure in her casket, in her fucking hand. Not the scratch-off tickets that she freaking loved. Not pictures of me, my mother, my brother, my uncle, my other uncle, God rest his soul. But the Hulk Hogan figure in her hands, as ridiculous as that sounds, when you watch Hulk Hogan defeating the Iron Sheik for the World Wrestling Federation Championship, there's proof. I've been saying this since day one on my hotline. All my friends personally have vouched for me on this. When he walks down the rampway, if you look right at the right-hand side, you will see me, and you will see my friend Vinny Solicido going like this, yeah, with his ugly 80s fucking striped shirt. We were there. And is it my favorite match of all time? No. But I lived through it. I lived through turning on every TV channel, and at some point Hulk Hogan is on it. Walking into a bodega, and there's Hulk Hogan napkins, straws, lunch boxes, thermoses, crayons, playing cards. When you hear interviews later on, oh, Vince McMahon, if Hulk Hogan wasn't available, Dusty Rhodes would have been the one. Dusty Rhodes wouldn't have been the one. You got to understand something. And listen, I don't know where this conversation goes. I promise you this. There will be joy. There will be laughter. There will be tears. There will also be anger and frustration. Like I said, I was blocked for 10 years. That man disappointed me more ways than Sunday. 10 years ago, almost to the day, you guys may not even realize it's almost 10 years to the day that we heard those awful words while he was banging somebody's wife. And I did a spoof 10 years ago. I did a spoof. I am a white American, fight for the rights of, fight for the white in every man. I am a white American, fight for what's right, fight for the whites. I did an entire 4-minute big fuck you to Hulk Hogan for doing that. It upset me. My grandmother is the one that got me into wrestling in 1979. In 1979, my grandmother was babysitting me. And one night, on a Saturday night, it was around midnight, my grandmother, in 1979, she lived very poor. She had a little black and white TV by her bed. And I hear this loud noise about wrestling. And I walked up to her bed and I said, Nanny, what are you watching? Oh, I'm watching wrestling. I sit down on the side of the bed and I'm watching it and I'm mesmerized. No, Hulk Hogan was not on the TV. But I was mesmerized with wrestling. And the next day, when we went back home, and my mom said, what did you just do Saturday? Oh, we played Crazy Eights. We played a little this, and, we watched a movie, we watched wrestling. And my mother's like, you watched what? And my grandma's like, yeah, he was up. He couldn't sleep. We watched a little wrestling. My mother's like, don't you ever allow him to watch that again. First of all, I'm 10 years old? 10 years old. And it's midnight. She doesn't want me to watch violence. That's when I knew I had to sneak in the middle of the night, turn my TV with the volume almost low, off, and watch wrestling Saturday nights. I couldn't watch it in the mornings because my mom would know. And I became a wrestling fan. In the 1980s, there was no social media. In the 1980s, computer technology was Commodore VIC-20s, and you still had Ataris. You had, the crash of the video game industry in 1982. You had the controversy with Iran, the hostages in 1979. You had Reagan as president, and there was still conflict with Russia, and he was trying to negotiate with Gorbachev. And you had everything from Iran and Russia. And we still had basic cable television. You only had a handful of channels. And the other channels weren't really anything of great. We needed a superhero. At that time, we needed a superhero. Hulk Hogan became that superhero. When he was in Rocky III as Thunderlips, and the way they did the camera work to make it look like he was 7'5" and Sylvester Stallone looked like a midget, it was larger than life. I will never forget it, and I've at least said it 100 times over the last 26 years. No, 29 years. What am I saying? 28 years. Who's counting? 28 years. I'll never forget that Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Hulk Hogan at the crossroads. Wrestling or Hollywood. Hulk Hogan at the crossroads. This was right after that movie. And it was fucking amazing. He wasn't even back in the WWF at that time. He was still in the AWA, and I didn't get to see AWA in New York. It sucked. I tape traded later on, but didn't get to enjoy it. I watched it through the magazines. And then he made his return. Bob Backlund brought him out. Bob Backlund loses the World Wrestling Federation Championship to the Iron Sheik. He's wrestling on main regular television. I don't remember who he was fighting. He might have even been fighting one of the Samoans or something. And Bob Backlund, in the middle of the match, just walks to the back. And listen, again, this is all on here and here. This is not research. I don't need research for this. And Hulk Hogan, Bob Backlund walks to the back. We're like, what's this Matarazzo doing? And he brings Hulk Hogan out, and the place went banana. And Hulk Hogan was officially in the WWF. And then we heard he was going to fight the Iron Sheik for the championship, and we got tickets. We were probably going to go to the Garden anyway, because about a year before, my mom would allow me and my friends to go to the Garden. We didn't go every time, because many times it would be on a Monday night, and we had school the next day. And no, we were not allowed to call in sick the next day, even if you went to New York City and then had to take the trains home. I don't remember the super buses at the time. So anyway, long story short, Hulk Hogan wins the championship. And he's everywhere. He was on Johnny Carson a year or two before, but he's all over the TV. He's on Entertainment Tonight. He's on all the talk shows. You know, he's doing commercials. He's doing this. And everywhere you see Hulkamania, Hulkamania, Hulkamania. You know, there's a reason. A lot of you may not even know this. There's a reason why that name is so powerful. How many of you have ever heard what they used to call Conan? Ask him. For years, if not a decade or two, everybody used to say Conan is the Hulk Hogan of Mexico. It's the Hulk Hogan of Mexico. And that's because he was the biggest, most over superstar at that time. And Hulkamania was everywhere. He was a superhero. It took larger-than-life villains. It takes larger-than-life villains to be an awesome superhero. You know, trying to be politically correct, you know, it doesn't work. You got good guy versus bad guy. I said earlier, people say, oh, if Hulk Hogan wasn't available, Dusty Rhodes would have been the guy. I love Dusty Rhodes. I became a wrestling fan in '79, and my earliest magazines that I bought through the mail on archive was Pro Wrestling, The Wrestler, 1977. Seeing the feud with Ivan Putski and Superstar Billy Graham, Superstar Billy Graham and Bruno Sammartino, Bruno Sammartino and whoever else. And you see a little bit of Hulk Hogan. See Dusty Rhodes, the infamous dog collar, the Texas Bull Rope match with Superstar Billy Graham. I love Superstar Billy Graham. I love Dusty Rhodes. But with all due respect, if Dusty Rhodes would have defeated the Iron Sheik in 1984, Dusty Rhodes would not be this larger-than-life superhero. Yeah, he would have been on talk shows and entertaining as fuck. But he's not a superhero. He looked like my uncle with the big pot belly. He was the common man. You don't want no common man fighting a fucking Iranian. You don't want a common man fighting 6'10" Big John Studd. You don't want a common man fighting King Kong Bundy. You don't want a common man fighting Slaughter when he was a turncoat. We needed a superhero, and 6 foot, whatever they used to call him at that time, 6'6", 6'3", whatever he ended up being, 302 pounds, Venice Beach, California. He looked like a superhero. He was larger than life. There was only one person. People have asked me over the years, who else would have been able to be that guy at the time? Dusty Rhodes could have been that guy, but you would not have had wrestling explode the way it did. You would not have had it explode the way it did. He would have been an extremely popular wrestler, but it would have been on the same level as NWA, the same level as AWA. You didn't have that guy that looked like he could literally destroy the world. And again, you have to live through it to understand it. All right. Other wrestlers had parts of it, but again, I say this with no disrespect intended. If you didn't live through it, you will never understand it. We talk about the Monday Night Wars more because the Monday Night Wars ended only 24 years ago, in 2001. So when you live through it every day, channel surfing, going to school and arguing with your friends, NWO or D-Generation X, WCW to WWF, did you watch Raw or did you watch Nitro? Or did you watch both and stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning? Or maybe you watched Nitro and you decided you want to watch it again because they do a replay right afterwards. Every day, every week was wrestling. No one would have been that guy that could have been the larger-than-life, 6'8", 302 pounds, Venice Beach, California, with the unique look and the charisma. And remember, I do not try to disrespect any other country that's watching this right now, but when you see that red, white, and blue floating in the background, he was our American hero. His theme music was real American. He was Mr. USA. I know Tony Atlas had that coined before, but so growing up in the 80s, everything was fucking Hulk Hogan. But now you get to the 90s, and in the 90s, things start changing. Technology is getting better. You're getting more cable television. You're getting some more risque entertainment. And here's another thing to think about, too. Think about how television was handled back then. It was just really clean. You couldn't have any major controversies on television. That's why when you look at the old Saturday Night's Main Events and they do goofy things like, Roddy Piper at his house with Halloween and, doing the stuff with Cyndi Lauper and Wendy Richter and, the stupid little skits and Mother's Day and things like that. That's what cable television was at that time. It was simple. When Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant wrestled at Saturday Night's Main Event in front of 30 million people, 30 million people. No one came close. No one came close. No one could have filled those shoes. But in the 90s, it started getting old. There's only so many times you could watch a superhero movie. You could watch Rambo. There's only so many times where you start getting a little tired of it. There's only so many times you could watch a Superman movie or watch a Spider-Man movie or watch something else. And, after 20, 30, 40, 50 times, you're like, I wish there was an alternate ending. I wonder what would have happened if this guy got whacked or this or that. You start getting a little tired of it, and Hulk Hogan now starts to become mortal. Then he does Arsenio Hall, and he talks about steroids. Then you have the steroid trial of 1993 with Vince McMahon. Then, you hear about, Hulk Hogan ratting out Jesse Ventura. Why have a wrestlers union? Now Hulk Hogan is not the larger-than-life superhero, but guess what? By the early 90s, when we knew Hulk Hogan did steroids, we didn't care. We didn't care. We were kind of disappointed, but we didn't care because he gave us so much entertainment and beat so many superheroes and was so pro-America and loved our country. And guess what? Here's another thing. You go back to the 80s, you even go back to the early 90s, wasn't about Republican and Democrat. It was about USA versus Iran, USA versus Russia, USA number one. It was never about Republican or Democrat. In fact, there were times where you really did not know where this person's political affiliation was. You did not care. In the 90s, technology advanced dramatically. Cable television advanced dramatically. And then you start getting a lot more of that risque entertainment. So when he went, and this is not an overall bio, I'm just telling you my thoughts about now and what I have seen the last couple of days. When he went to WCW, yes, he fought Ric Flair in the WWF before he left, before Rick left. Well, Rick was actually still there. He left it in early 93 when Raw first came on the air. But Hogan and Flair fought, but there was no championships involved. So when Hulk went to WCW and did that parade in Florida, yeah, it was cheesy as fuck. Yeah, WCW bit WWF by bringing in Mr. T and trying to recreate things and, adding Shaq to the mix, because Shaq, I think, at that time was still on the Miami Heat? I didn't follow basketball that close, although I was a Knicks fan. But, he won the championship immediately. It was like, all right, okay. But you know what? Here's the difference. When Hulk Hogan was champion in the WWF, especially in the 80s, I didn't want to watch NWA. Wasn't interested. If I could, I would. If I was able to watch Telemundo, I would. If I could watch in other wrestling, I would. But WWF was my show, my promotion. And Kev, God rest his soul, when Kev would always talk about wrestlers, say, when are you going to come here? When are you going to come? How many times do you remember Kev would say, I wish that guy would come here? And people used to say, Kev, what are you talking about here? What does here mean? And what Kev meant was WWE, because that's what we grew up on. That was our home base. WWF was New York. He didn't work for WWF. I didn't work for WWF. But here meant, what we witnessed and enjoyed. But Hulk Hogan going to WCW was interesting. It was a little bit refreshing to see some different opponents, but at that time, Ravishing Rick Rude is now becoming a badass, and you're starting to focus a little bit more on Flair, and you're starting to focus on Vader and some of the other guys, and you're starting to think like, you know what, these people are badass, and don't get me wrong, I fucking loved Roddy Piper in the WWF. Loved Roddy Piper. That feud with Hogan was immense. Many of us were torn. My first ever wrestling figure was a Roddy Piper figure. And I used to torment my grandmother. My grandmother adored Hulk Hogan. Adored him. My grandmother, I told this story 1,000 times on my other shows. My grandmother used to come over in the mid-'80s. And she'd sit down, that portly little body of hers, and she'd be looking at the paper and she'd be drinking a coffee. And I would take my Roddy Piper figure and I put it just behind her other arm. And she doesn't even know it's there. And I'm giggling. She's looking at me and she's like, what's so funny? And then she looks over and she's like, get that motherfucker out of my face. She hated Roddy Piper. Hated everybody who tried to hurt Hulk Hogan. I said this before and I got, I lost my train of thought. If you ever watch Hulk Hogan in the Iron Sheik's match, as soon as Hulk Hogan gets the 3 count, you will see an elderly lady sitting in ringside, and the camera's right on her face, and she is giddy beyond belief. She looks like a little Italian woman. Go like this. That's my grandmother. Just add 200 pounds to her. That's my grandmother. That's my grandmother throughout Hulk Hogan's entire tenure. My grandmother passed away before Hulk Hogan left WWF. So I've always appreciated Hulk Hogan for the happiness he gave to my grandmother, the bond that I had with my grandmother. I was talking the other day on Patreon, and my grandmother went on a cruise in 1987, I think it was. And on the cruise, the funny thing is, I could not find the picture today, but I found the cardboard. I have it here. I found the cardboard. Lo and behold, the fucking picture is missing, so I'm mad. It's somewhere in his room. But I found the holder. And this is from Photo Parade, Celebrity Pose. This in here had a black and white photo of my grandmother and Hulk Hogan. Only problem was it wasn't Hulk Hogan. She paid $5 on a cruise ship to take a picture with a cardboard cutout, a life-size cardboard cutout of Hulk Hogan. And I'm going to find that picture this week. I'm going to clean this area up. And I'm going to show you that picture. When you see that picture and you look at the smile on my grandmother's face, she has her hand on his tummy. because she just adored him so much. She just wanted to hug him, and it was a fucking cardboard cutout. Things like that are very powerful for me. There were points in my life that I was closer to my grandmother than anybody else in my lifetime. So when Hulk Hogan started to get a little bit tiresome, because you don't want that great ending, for 10 years. And then the NWO comes around, and people try to compare NWO to D-Generation X or the NWO to any faction today. You can't even compare it. NWO, it was something so unique that you'd have hundreds of people throwing garbage in the ring at them, and they're all wearing NWO shirts. It was something that was talked about every single day. I don't care if it was originated in Japan and Bischoff copied it. Didn't matter. It reinvented him, and you wanted to boo him, but also cheer him at the same time. And Hollywood Hogan, it was tremendous. Then obviously time catches up. And now we're in the Attitude Era. And again, this is not a bio. I'm just getting to today as to why I'm so disappointed at so many people out there. And let me make this disclaimer right early before I say anything else. And I'm almost done. No one out there is required to mourn the death of Hulk Hogan. No one. I will get to Tony Khan and AEW and some of the reactions later. Do not assume you know what I'm going to say, because I've thought about this long and hard the last couple of days. Some of what I say may surprise some people. Hulk Hogan is killing it with the NWO. But now you have the Attitude Era and reality television. Reality TV and a lot of, even you look at some of the TV shows and Girls Gone Wild, and you have Ultimate Fighting or mixed martial arts, and this is banned and this is not allowed, and you'll turn on TV late at night, and even porn started getting better on cable television. When I used to watch scrambled porn in the early to mid 80s, you turn on Channel 68 here in New York late at night, and you get this blurry scrambled picture. And for a split second, you got to see a nipple. For a little split second, you got to see ass. And then when you were able to take a butter knife, when your mother and father would leave and go out for the night, and you take a butter knife and you break into their bedroom and you turn on the cable box and you're watching, WHT adult movies late at night, you realize, number one, there's no penetration. Number two, they repeat the same scene over and over again, because you can't have a sex scene run for 5 minutes and only show the 9 areas with no penetration. Anybody who grew up in my era knows what I'm talking about. But even in the 90s now, you have illegal cable boxes. And now you got the Spice Network, you got the Playboy Channel. Now suddenly, oh my God, I get to see everything. And I got 300 channels. Look at the internet. Oh my God. There's a new world out there. It wasn't just a new world order, it was the new world of technology and the internet age. And then you got reality TV, and then, you see what happens with WCW. Creatively, it turned into a disaster. Ended up going out of business. And then you see the bigger names. They prefer to stay home and just get paid off of Time Warner, AOL Time Warner, just living out their contracts. We thought Hogan, Hall, Nash, Flair, everybody would be on fucking Raw in a matter of week or two. And instead, we get Invasion. And say what you want. I know what culture and the people today want to convince you that Invasion was the biggest disappointment in history. Did 800,000 pay-per-view buys. We knew exactly who was going to be on Invasion's pay-per-view. It's not like that they were teasing an ultimate surprise, and then give us their version of a renegade. We knew exactly who was going to be on Invasion's pay-per-view, and we ordered that motherfucker, so we knew exactly who was going to be on at that time. But unfortunately, it was. A lot of those bigger names were not available yet because they just wanted to sit at home and collect the AOL Time Warner, contracting, totally understandable. And then you get the NWO. I'm going to inject the poison. The NWO. Holy shit, no way out. We're going to get the NWO. And they come out. And this is only 2 years, pretty much a year or two removed. And yeah, Hogan looks the same. Hall and Nash still look the same. You know, their work rate was not going to be anything that we thought would be different. But wow, we're getting the NWO and WWE. This is awesome. And then it turned out to be a little bit of a train wreck. They put Shawn Michaels in the NWO, and they try to recreate some of the things, and you're now having WWE spin on it. And one thing you realized is that if you were not created in the WWE, even a gimmick, they were not going to just go balls out and just capitalize on it. That's why when Goldberg came in, they tried to do comedy, made him wear the gold dust wig and all this other shit. Other wrestlers who came from the WCW ended up being humbled. Public Enemy thought coming from there and being an ECW legend, they thought that their shit didn't stink, and they got APA'd out of there in a matter of weeks, which was sad to witness. But Hogan, they're trying to redo the NWO, and he faces Rock at WrestleMania. And to me, it's either that or Bret and Austin is my favorite match of all time. And I lean towards Hogan Rock, and I've said this for years now, is because you watch that match, not only is the commentary perfect for it, not only was the story ad-libbed at points perfect, but look at the fucking crowd. Look at their reaction. This is a guy who admitted 10 years earlier that he did steroids. This is a guy in the wrestling magazines and the hotlines and the Meltzer dirt sheets and everything. And I'm not throwing shade against them. These are the ones who are saying that Hogan's pulling creative control. Hogan insists this. Hogan insists that. There were many reasons to kind of dislike Hogan. You watch that match and you just focus on that crowd. You don't think it got ridiculously goofy when he's hulking up and doing this? And he's punching Rock and others, and they're like selling like they just got hit by a crane. Didn't matter. You know why? Because a lot of those 20-something-year-olds and 30-something-year-olds that were in the crowd were in their teens and preteens when Hulkamania came around. And for a split second, you got nostalgia. Your childhood hero can still do it. And he delivered. And for a few moments, time stood still. What is so awful about getting older like me is that you realize you don't know how much time you got left. It's out of the ordinary to die in your 20s, your 30s, and your 40s. I've lost some very good friends over the last couple of years. I've lost some family members. I've lost people that I've worked with, customers. And what's happening now is a lot of my favorites growing up are now either dead or now they're in their 70s, their 80s. My favorite baseball player of all time is Reggie Jackson. And I watch old games and I fucking smile when he hit the 3 home runs in the 77 World Series. And you know that giant plaque that I have autographed. It's my favorite autograph piece I've ever had. And a lot of you know that story, how I didn't have it for about 10 years and got it back. And now I'm like, oh my God, this guy is an old man. It hurts. It hurts to see your heroes, your childhood heroes get old. It breaks my heart when I see my dad. I was with my dad today. And I leave my parents' house every week and I get this really deep, dark, empty feeling inside like, is this the last time I'm going to see them? Am I going to get a phone call during the week that, look, and that's something you think about. over and over and over again. You don't want to see your heroes get old. You don't want to see your immortals become mortal. And the last thing you want to see is someone who was buried with my grandmother, who I idolized as a teenager, preteen. It got campy and corny later on, but didn't matter. It didn't fucking matter. And we hear Hulk Hogan not even sleeping with somebody's wife, because we covered it. Anybody has access to the DTKC archive, the shows are there. We laughed at it. He looked funny. Seeing that dark, almost reddish brown tan and the overly dyed hair and your superhero. And look, we grew up watching Hogan just wearing a pair of trunks. The only difference was the trunks were on the floor. And he's fucking banging Heather Clem, and we were laughing at it like, holy shit, Hogan's getting laid. But then he starts using the N-word because he doesn't like the producer that's working with his daughter, Brooke. And then several years earlier, his son, Nick, gets into an auto accident. And we covered that in real time. And those episodes are up there too. And when his son got into the car accident, you know, I was young once. The only difference is he's got a Testarossa or Lamborghini, whatever the fuck it was. Me, I had an 83 Trans Am. He had a fucking amazing car. Me, I had an old used shit. And at that time, it was either, do I get new tires? Do I drive around with bold tires and have an awesome stereo, or have a regular cheesy stereo and have some safe tires? Nah, I went for the stereo. And one time I was driving in the rain, slammed on my brakes, car kept going, hit another car, pretty much ruined my Trans Am. Some of you have seen pictures of that car. I have pictures of me with that car from the 80s, late 80s. I lost that car because of my doing. I didn't drink and drive, but, you know, I didn't race, but me, I was careless. When Nick's friend John Graziano was in a vegetative state and hearing Hulk Hogan say it was God's will, and then hearing the prison conversations, I was pissed. But I also said to myself, this is a father whose son is in a prison and he doesn't know what his future could be. He could be in jail for 20 years. What if John Graziano would have died? And Hulk is doing everything he can to console his son. I was angrier at Nick than I was at Hulk for a little while because Nick was the one that caused the car accident. I almost felt like, you know, I think Hulk was just trying to be a dad to console his son, and we got to hear it on tape. Breaking news, everybody. When we're extremely young, our heroes look larger than life. Our heroes look near perfect. When you look at the comic books growing up, no matter who your superhero of choice was, no matter what faction of choice it was, when you look at a comic book, you see boxes, quotes, and it's a very simplified story. But there would be, you know, positive in the beginning, controversy, you know, threats, and rescue and hero at the end. And you go to the next issue, or you go to be continued, be an asshole, like, fuck, I got to buy the next issue, see what's happening next. Now in the movies, you got to really get deep down inside into the emotions and realize that people are imperfect and this, and that, and blah, 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 blah. So when you start getting into the private lives of our superheroes, you realize they have flaws. They have flaws just like us, sometimes even worse, but even more magnified. And that's what happened with Hulk Hogan. His flaws were under a microscope and a magnifying glass. And there was a lot of reasons to dislike Hulk Hogan. From Hogan Knows Best to some of his other antics, for, the things he said to his son and the things he said, using the N-word. And the reason why this is what people need to understand. Some wrestlers, I don't want to just say black, but some wrestlers who have been very vocal negatively about Hulk Hogan, even as recent as this year, those wrestlers have a more intimate reason to be upset. Some of them were there in the locker room when Hulk Hogan not too long ago said to the roster, there could be a camera recording wherever you go, brother. Don't, wasn't saying like you could be a racist, but just don't get caught doing it. That's not what he was trying to say, but the problem was all of us were looking for being humble, having an apology. You guys may remember last year, you can look on my website, dontony.com, and find the episode. I played the clip of Booker T and Hulk Hogan from 5-6 years ago, I think it was. And I said, that's the closest you will ever get from an apology from Hulk Hogan. And the thing is this, the wrestlers and the people who knew him personally, maybe not closely, they have every right to be that offended. For people like me who grew up idolizing this man, just how important he was in my life, in my grandmother's life, and to realize that not only does he have flaws, but he's got some pretty fucked up flaws. It hurt. It hurt. It hurt. And what I desperately wanted for the last 10 years, and I've said it so many times on the shows, I wanted this guy to go to a black school with black teenagers and talk about what happened, talk about the emotions, explain why you're really not a racist and why you made a mistake and this and that. And if anybody confronts you about it, you answer them back, own up to it. Booker T and a bunch of others swear to tomorrow that he is not a racist. There are tons of people all across the globe that knew him personally who insist, no, he's not. But we needed to hear it from his own voice. Crying on Good Morning America 10 years ago doesn't cut it. Because a lot of people felt the only reason why he was crying is because he got caught. And that is why some people are still hurt now, because we wanted to have that ending. Be a human being, Hulk. Let Terry Bollea became Hulk Hogan. He lived in a bubble. I'm not going to criticize any of his friends. You know who they are. But a lot of those people protected that bubble and probably convinced Hulk, we know you're not a racist. The only person you have to answer to is the man upstairs. He knows you're not racist. There's always going to be that element online that is going to rip you no matter what. You could turn around and fucking walk on coal barefoot and apologize till the cows come home and people will not accept it. Those people you cannot do anything about. But there's a lot of people who protected him and convinced him to be in that bubble. And that's what he did. And it hurt because we just wanted that, just a little bit of, you could be a superhero by humbling yourself and being, accountable. And he didn't do that. He refused to do that. And that's why there are a lot of people who are hurt, disappointed. Unfortunately, at the same time, you have a boatload of people online that just hate the man, that absolutely just hate everything about him. And you have every right to be that way. But It is abnormal. You know, for someone that some people did not care about, man, you can't get him out of your fucking mouths. I watched people who I consider friends online calling everybody else who are calling out AEW for not paying tribute. They're calling those people out, calling them weird and this and that. And then Tony Schiavone issues an apology on Collision, which I'll get to in a moment. And then these people are like, are you happy now? Are you happy now? Are you happy now? And I'm like, you do not realize it? You do not justify your hate because of other hate. People used Hulk Hogan's flaws as a reason to spread hate everywhere else. I watch people from the 60s and the 70s, politicians, activists, people that I never heard of before, and people pay tribute. And sometimes it's controversial. Somebody passes away from the Black Panthers not too long ago, and people are paying big tributes. And, you know, me, curiosity, do a little bit of research, and I'm like, you know, this is somewhat kind of controversial, you know, take a stance on this and that. There was an Olympic champion who did the Black Panther sign when he won like the silver or gold medal in the Olympics, I think in the early 70s. He died not too long ago. And people are revering him and paying tribute. And I'm like, you know, this is an interesting person, interesting story. But I didn't say anything about it because I really didn't know much about him. You know, my point is that for the people out there that just were not Hulk Hogan fans, they got some weird fascination of just hating on the man. Instead of just letting people grieve, they got to throw their 2 cents in. I've watched countless people. No one's going to tell me that I have to grieve Hulk Hogan and, you know, you do it. And every time I read it, I looked on their page to see if anybody added them, hey, are you going to pay tribute to Hulk Hogan? I'm like, nobody fucking asked you. If you don't like the man, if you don't care that he died, go focus on something else. Talk about Ozzy Osborne. Talk about Malcolm Jamal Warner. Talk about, you know, anybody else you want to talk about. You know, why are you interjecting yourself in a conversation that has nothing to do with you? And I just watched in the last 48 hours, the worst of the worst come out. And I'm going to say this. Thursday night, I did Patreon. And we were on for 3 hours. And in real time, I was checking AEW's Twitter. And in real time on the show, I said, they haven't paid any mention to Hulk Hogan yet. And by the end of the night, they didn't. And I was like, wow, it's pretty amazing. Because in the industry that you're in, the biggest superstar of all time dies. And there's not even a mention, just out of respect. Maybe not towards him, but if you send condolences to the family and friends of that person, many of them that work in AEW, there are wrestlers there who were friendly with Hulk Hogan, you pay respect to them. You don't necessarily have to like them. So my initial reaction was, you know, just classy, you know, just to show, you know, respect. But you then think, you know, back Tony Khan early on in AEW in 2019, Hulk Hogan is not welcome at our shows. And, you know, even back then we were like, what did Hulk Hogan do to you? And then you realize, okay, yeah, he made those comments, never apologized for them. Like I said, that Booker T interview is the closest you'll ever get to an apology. But, you know, in the last 48 hours thinking about it, I give Tony Khan credit for standing by his guns. He hated the man. Now, my question to all of you is, yeah, Hulk Hogan is flawed. Yes, he said some pretty fucking awful things. But there is a whole world out there in the hip-hop community, not just fans, but people in the profession. You have countless people of color that are famous who knew Hulk Hogan personally that say otherwise about the man. You have celebrities, athletes, other people telling personal stories, their interactions with him, and you don't have any room to say, all right, he totally fucked up in 2015. And listen, I was one of the ones that said early on, could you imagine how many times Hulk Hogan said that word that was never caught on camera? It was probably just normal conversation for him, which is fucked up. But when you start refusing, that's the thing that gets me upset the most. When you refuse to look at an overall picture and say, okay, he royally fucked up in 2015. Yes, he lives in that bubble and refused to just humble himself. Even if he felt that he wasn't a racist, he should have just come out and said, listen, I was ignorant, didn't understand. I didn't realize how much it offended and hurt people. He refused to do that, and I will forever be very upset at that. But when you see people out there that they found their reason to hate this man and always use it as a reason to shit on this man and refuse to listen to a hell of a lot of other people that are saying otherwise, that's when you start really saying to yourself, yeah, there's some people out there that just have hatred in their hearts. There are a lot of people online that have hatred in their hearts for whatever reason it could be, and refuse to be told otherwise. They have a hatred for Hulk Hogan. And when you start hearing all these other things come out, and a lot of it hasn't, I just played 2 clips at the beginning of the show just because I wanted to find something out of, the ordinary that maybe nobody heard before. But the point is, there's enough people out there who matter that say otherwise about him. So you say to yourself, okay, Hogan's got a lot of flaws and he definitely fucked up, but maybe he's not this, racist, evil person that I painted him out to be, and the problem is those people don't want to hear it. Why does AEW need to tribute Hulk Hogan? He had nothing to do. Why do they have to mention anybody that has to do with wrestling? Well, AEW mentions people that have nothing to do with them either. You got Owen Hart Cups and everything else. It's not about, if this person was in our company, then we can acknowledge them. But I give Tony Khan credit for standing to his guns. As immature it may come across that you've allowed yourself to personally have this much hatred for a man and refuse forgiveness. Most of us don't live by the Bible. Most of us don't live by, we say we're Catholic or we're this or we're that, and we try to, be, but, we don't live by reading the Bible. But one thing I grew up is sometimes you got to forgive. And I'm not the person Hulk Hogan needed forgiveness from. Hulk Hogan needed that forgiveness from other people, and they never got it. And for those who really took it personal, I say this. For all of you Hulkamaniacs out there, whether you're 27 or 77, for all those Hulkamaniacs out there, whether you're white, black, straight, gay, Asian, Italian, all of the above, if you were a Hulk Hogan fan at some point in your life, and you were hurt and very frustrated at Hulk Hogan for not just just owning up to this, You have every right to be upset and disappointed because we will never get that apology. We will never get that moment. For everyone else out there that never liked him, who just found this as a reason to hate and just flat out use that as an excuse to spread hate, is something seriously wrong with you. And unfortunately, those people you cannot redeem. Social media is what it is. It will never get better. It may get regulated down the line, but it'll never get better. There are too many very upset people out there at the world that if you have a flaw, because listen, this is not about AEW, but there are some people who work in AEW who have said some really questionable things that have been caught on camera, and they're still there. There are some who even said they would love to have sexual assault on someone, and they're still there. Why? Because they owned up to their sins, and they were forgiven. And guess what? They turned out to be better people. Every person that pertains to, I haven't heard anything bad about, because people can be redeemed. It's if you choose to. For those that despise Hulk Hogan, he was not redeemable. You were not going to forgive him. But if you have an ounce of respect in your body, respect those that want to pay tribute to him. People were getting irate, angry at the WWE for paying this tribute on Friday night. Just irate. Cody Rhodes, he had to say that because he's got to walk the... Fuck you. You don't know Hulk Hogan personally. You don't know Cody Rhodes personally. You don't know Triple H personally. You don't know anybody that this pertains to personally. For those that know those people personally, they're the ones that have every right to say it. You don't know. I don't know them. I don't know what's in their hearts. I don't know how many people were on that stage that turned around and said, thank you, that's over. All right, I did my good deed. Thank God. Okay, rest in peace, Hulk. All right, now we move on. I don't know. You don't know either. And, for people to act like they do, Bischoff has every right to. Vince Russo has every right to. The people that were in his inner circle, Jimmy Hart has every right to. Anybody who's worked with him has every right to. Anybody that shared a locker room with him has every right to. The people who he's encountered the last 10 years since that incident, they have the right to. All of us are on the outside looking in. And the thing is, there's going to come a time, remember this, there's going to come a time that some of you who hate Hulk Hogan for the things he did, there's going to come a time that somebody that you absolutely love is going to slip up. And you may find yourself forgiving that person. Someone else may find it that, nope, you are guilty and you will have a lifetime of hate for the rest of your life, no matter how much you redeem yourself. One day you're going to support someone who's going to fuck up. And how's it going to feel when you turn around and want to show forgiveness in someone and you know that person's a better person, but yet everybody around you is doing nothing but what you're doing right now? What I witnessed the last 2 days was fucking awful. Again, I said this at the beginning and we'll move on shortly. Definitely love your feedback too. I grew up a Hulkamaniac. Hulk Hogan was the biggest wrestler in my life for many, many years. And my grandmother adored him. And I loved my grandmother. I miss my grandmother to this day. I witnessed Hulk Hogan's entire career. Memphis and others I watched on videotapes later on. I witnessed his entire career. I've also unfortunately witnessed a lot of his private life and realized that, at the end of the day, he became a millionaire celebrity who believed his own shtick, who was protected in a bubble that, was convinced that he didn't need to own up to certain things that he should have. But it is what it is. And do you celebrate? Do you celebrate? Do you ignore it? Or do you just have this intense hatred with pitchforks? Me, I chose to remember all the good. I'm still very, very disappointed that man, look at WWE. They could not bring him back to television since the first week in January because of his reaction in California. You know, Hulk, Bischoff, and everybody else convinced, oh, it's just California, Hollywood, brother. It was Hollywood Hogan, brother. And he did those interviews. And remember what I said early this year? When is somebody like, I don't want to single out Ariel Helwani, but when he did an interview, I said, when is somebody going to interview Hulk Hogan and say, listen, a lot of people think you're a passive racist. What do you say to that? I wanted that. I tweeted it. I didn't delete it. It's still there. I wanted someone interviewing him about real American wrestling, ask him, say, Hulk, a lot of people think you're a passive racist. You know, what do you say to that? Because I wanted to hear the answer. I wanted to hear from him that he's not and why he's not. I wanted to be convinced. We never got that. We never got that. But for me to turn around and ignore the biggest, most important wrestler in the last 50 years that brought wrestling to the next level. It doesn't matter. Well, what if it was Macho Man instead of him? Or what if it was Dusty Rhodes instead of... It wasn't. That's the point. The man became a superhero, larger than life. Everywhere you turned, there was a Hulk Hogan something. And it carried over to WCW and the Monday Night Wars. Then it carried over back to the WWE in the early 2000s. Then it got a little bit campy, you know, when he won the championship back. But luckily, you know, he came across The Undertaker. And one of my favorite moments when The Undertaker hog-tied him with the leg and rode around the back of the arena with Hogan. That was some of the funniest shit, you know. But do I celebrate how important all the things he gave me? Or do I just hold him a lifetime of hate because of what he got caught on camera for saying? I chose to look back at all of the happiness he put in my life and put in my grandmother's life and put in the Monday Night Wars and put in when he came back. That's 20 some odd years. And I'm not going to just throw that all away because unfortunately he said some really stupid, awful shit that got caught on camera and, you know, never really owned up to it. But guess what? I didn't like Kamala Harris at all. I didn't like that he was drunk in a bar intentionally saying our name wrong. I'm like, Hulk, it's not necessary, man. You know, there's things even recently that annoyed me about him. But over the last 10 years since, haven't heard any incidents about racism, haven't heard anybody making any, you know, legitimate accusations about anything. To me, he was a millionaire, you know, in a bubble, you know, who, you know, obviously became a huge Trump supporter. And, you know, people have every right to dislike him for certain things. There's a difference between dislike and hatred. And that's what it comes down to the last 2 days. If you dislike them, fine. Fine. If you didn't grow up as a Hulkamaniac in the 80s, even in the early to mid-90s, you'll never understand the magnitude of Hulkamania from 1984 to about 1992. You'll never understand. You'll never live through it. And that's not a shot on you. The problem is that some people out there insist on thinking that they could watch the WWE Network and watch every week of television and think, oh, yeah, I know what it was like back then. Oh, yeah, no, I know exactly. No, you don't. Because you didn't eat, sleep, shit it. You didn't go to school every day talking about it. You didn't play fight with your friends in the park, cosplaying these wrestlers. You didn't go to the shows and have it an emotion and being part of it. You're doing it now. with what you're witnessing. Now you got AEW, now you got the Bloodline, now you got whatever floats your boat. Now you got GCW, whatever floats your boat. Now you got that. 10, 20 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll have people that never experienced that, and they think because they watch videos, watch promos, that they can recreate what you feel like going through it every single day. And they can't. So, that's why, with all due respect to those out there, much younger than me, that think that they have a grasp on what Hulkamania was like growing up, you'll never understand it because you didn't live through it. And it's not a negative. It's not a negative. Very quickly, I got to say this. I give Tony Khan credit for standing by his guns, for not apologizing. With that said, I did see what Tony Schiavone said on Collision. And remember what I just said about Tony Khan. Keep that in the back of your mind when I say this. That apology reminded me of Jay Briscoe. To me, that was not Tony Khan and AEW giving condolences for the passing of Hulk Hogan, acknowledging Hulk Hogan's death. To me, that was a TNT decision. Because Tony Schiavone focused on the Monday Night Wars and TNT. When Tony Schiavone, the minute he says, right here on this very network 30 years ago, nobody cares 30 years ago. It's a totally different network than what it is now. Right here, 30 years ago, the Monday Night Wars, that was a TNT apology. They wanted to acknowledge it. That's my honest opinion. Nothing wrong with that, but it reminded me of Jay Briscoe because we know the controversy of Jay Briscoe and the Briscoes many years before, saying some questionable stuff, and Warner Media did not want the Briscoes on AEW television. Nope. Do you remember when Jay Briscoe tragically died? There was a lot of people upset online. AEW was not allowed to pay tribute. And then finally, Warner Brothers Discovery gave the go, and then Mark Briscoe was able to wrestle that match. And it was beautiful against Jay Lethal. And they paid tribute. It was a beautiful tribute. And guess what? Mark Briscoe is accepted and is beloved and wrestles on Warner weekly, and all is forgotten. But I think some people forget that, think about all of the time the Briscoes could have been on AEW television, but were not allowed because of previous comments. Everybody in that company knew Jay Briscoe was not a racist or whatever, however you interpreted his comments. He was not a racist, not a homophobe, not a xenophobe, none of that. They don't do that. But Warner Brothers Discovery didn't care. They heard what they heard. They made the decision. And only in death was he allowed to be mentioned on TV. And it was a learning lesson. It was a learning lesson. And to me, how this was handled yesterday was the same thing as Jay Briscoe. People won't say that to you because, number one, how dare you compare Jay Briscoe's death to Hulk Hogan's death? And that in itself is one of the most dumbest things that somebody could say. But again, I was very upset. This is the opposite. AEW wanted to tribute him and couldn't. And then they were allowed to. So again, a lot of beautiful tributes online. The Rock's tribute on Twitter had me crying. Because as I'm watching it, as ridiculous as this sounds, no, I'm not crying, but as I'm watching it, I'm reminded how old I am now. I'm reminded that my favorites are going. For a split second, I'm reminded about my family, my parents. I'm reminded about Kevin recently passing. I'm reminded about, you know what really sucks? Take a look behind me. Now, I've had a lot of problems. I got to re-glue these tiles. I'm going to change the posters in the background. Things are starting to fall down. I'm surprised nothing fell down tonight. That's how fragile everything is. But I want you to just look at this figurines. Just look for a second. Almost every person there now is dead. Almost every person back there. Taz, Brett is still there, but that was not a tribute for the fallen. Those are some of my favorites growing up. You know, and some that some of you wanted back there. It's turning into everybody's going. You know, a couple of years ago, my favorite wrestler of all time, Terry Funk, and my favorite wrestler in the last decade, Bray Wyatt, both died within a couple of days of each other. One of my closest friends ever in wrestling takes her own life not too long ago. Every time I see nostalgia, I'm reminded that as we get older, our favorites are going to go. When I grew up in my teens and even in my 20s, I don't recall many people dying that my mother was glued to the TV watching the news coverage. My dad. The only one that really sticks with me is Elvis Presley. When Elvis Presley died in 1977, believe it or not, I think I still have the picture in this computer. I on this program. Oh yeah, I do. See this picture? That is me in Wildwood, New Jersey. That was the day that Elvis Presley died. My parents happened to take a picture of me that day, and we were in a hotel room. I think this was the day before, and then we heard he died. I remember my mom glued to the television about the passing of Elvis Presley. When we're younger, we don't think about those things. A lot of those people on social media acting this way, most of them are in their 20s, some 30s, maybe a few older, but they're still young enough that this doesn't hit them like that. 20 years from now, when some of the wrestlers we enjoy now are now in their 60s and even 70s and starts becoming their time, then it really hits you in the gut and it gives you a reality check. Like, man, you got to start enjoying yourself. I see a lot, and I'm not one for peace in the world. I mean, shit's going to happen and you could do everything you possibly can about it and it's not going to change nothing. All I worry about is my inner circle, taking care of my family, enjoying time with my family, my friends, all of you, the things I enjoy, and that's it. When I'm gone, I'm gone. I'm gone, I'm gone. That's what I care about. I don't care about politics. I don't care about this. I don't care. As long as I have my bills somewhat in check and I'm enjoying myself, have a good balance, that's all I care about. I'm not interested in these wars online. I see people having these podcast wars and fighting like that. DT, what are your thoughts on it? I think it's stupid. I think in 10 years goes by just like this. Just like this, 10 years will go by. And then now, somebody who's 40 is going to be 50. Somebody who's 50 is going to be 60. Some of their favorites are going to be in their 50s and 60s. And then you're going to realize, man, just enjoy yourself. Seriously. All of this unnecessary level of hatred the last 2 days, ridiculous. Ridiculous. But again, rest in peace to Hulk Hogan. My thoughts and my prayers are with everyone who he is affected, those who knew him, those who were close to him. I am one to acknowledge Hulk Hogan is the biggest, most celebrated wrestler of all time. The Babe Ruth of wrestling. He didn't have to wrestle 5-star matches, but the level of entertainment, how they were able to take wrestling to a different level, to branch it out, to make it pop culture, to make it a part of sports entertainment, Americana, just an accepted form of entertainment. He, yes, could not do it without his foes, could not do it without Vince McMahon. I heard I watched a lot of tributes the last couple of days. the one comment that really hit me the most, believe it or not, is from Brian Last. Brian Last said something that Kevin and I talked about a year ago. And we said, it's sad that 5 years from now, the three biggest names ever in wrestling, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Vince McMahon, could all be gone. He said a little bit different, talking about, look at how they ended up controversial with Flair and Vince. But, Vince, Hogan, and Flair are the three biggest names that wrestling still had as far as its overall scope, its landscape. Hulk Hogan allowed wrestling to get to the next level. Yeah, listen, when someone is that high on the food chain, peons. Some people are ignored. There are some wrestlers who unfortunately are now in their 40s and 50s that always felt that they should have gone further in wrestling, but were held back because Hogan was in charge, or Hogan had the power, or Hogan this, or Hogan that, or other people had the creative power and they didn't give him a chance. And unfortunately, that's life sometimes, and it's sad that you have to live through that. But, to turn around and you can ignore that Hulk Hogan is the biggest star of all time. You could ignore it. You could dislike it. And I totally respect that. But to turn around and dispute it and to shoot it down because of some really stupid things that this guy did, is just, that's a level of hate that you really need to get out of your system. You don't need to forgive him. He doesn't need your forgiveness. He doesn't need my forgiveness either. But, the turnaround, and because you didn't like his style, because you didn't like him as a person, because he didn't represent your form of wrestling, because, he was a Trump supporter, because of this, if you're going to use all of that as reasoning to, rip others who put him on the Mt Rushmore, that's a level of hate that you really need to get out of your system. And unfortunately, my friends, I saw what happened in Chelsea Green the last 2 days. And she'll never see this. Going off of social media for a couple of weeks isn't going to change anything. Isn't going to change nothing. You're going to come back and it's the same social media as before. What people need to start doing is putting people on mute, putting people on block, ignoring that noise. Because I promise you, to the Chelsea Greens and everybody else out there who have that hate put their way, trust me, those people are not obsessed and focused on you. They will find someone else just like that. So they'll move on. They'll move on. But to turn around, I need to take a break, I need to do this, you're just making those people feel like they won. There's an enjoyment. There's an enjoyment that some of these people have. They enjoy to see other people hurt. They enjoy to see that they got to someone. And, that's a level of hate that I honestly don't ever want to see. I don't ever want to see. So, I hope in this first 80 minutes, I hope I got my point across. We could talk about individual matches. We could talk about certain moments and memories. Everybody and their mother has done that. You're more than happy to post it in the chat, in the comments. I can mention some of you as well. The level of importance Hulk Hogan had on this industry. And unfortunately, guys, we realize that a lot of very important people end up, imperfect. They're imperfect. Hogan upset a lot of people because people wanted him to always be a superhero. People always wanted him to be a superhero. People wanted him, towards the end of his life to always be that superhero that, but if you noticed the television coverage, almost all of it was positive. Almost all of it was positive. I felt bad for people on both sides who admitted that they grew up being a Hulkamaniac, and simply because they're just paying tribute, oh, you support a racist, huh? You know, and it was just like, I just watched that and I'm like, man, you know, this shit'll never get better. It'll never get better. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. Social media is only going to get worse. If it ever gets regulated, which I don't even know if that's a good idea, it's never going to get better. It's never going to get better. When I grew up in the 80s, even to the early part of the 90s, we didn't have this. We didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. So everything that we talked about was all focused on whoever you communicated with. You didn't know how the people felt in Texas, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in California. You only knew the people around you. And it was divided at times. This person, loves Bundy. This person loves Hogan. This person loves Piper. This person loves both. That's what you had. And that made wrestling so much more fun, man. People have said over 20 years, 30 years that the internet ruined wrestling. No, it didn't ruin wrestling. Wrestling is bigger than it's ever been. But what it did ruin is the innocence of it, the innocence, the intimacy of it. Everybody loves my Uncle Joe story because it really happened. For those and I'm gonna move on. I'll just tell this quick story. In 1982, I was over at my Aunt Fina's house. I don't know if it was my grandmother's birthday, but we were over at my Aunt Fina's house for a birthday, and wrestling was on, and I was watching on the couch. My uncle walks over and he's like, "What is that crap you're watching?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's wrestling." And he's like, "That shit's fake." I'm like, "No, it's not, Uncle Joe." And my Uncle Joe was insistent. He reminds me of some people today, insistent to show me that wrestling was fake. 1982. Fina, you got a tape? You got a blank tape? And she's like, what? She gives him a tape. He puts the tape in a fucking VCR, and I think it was Jules Strongbow. I don't remember what it was. It might have even been 83. I think it was 82, though. I don't remember who was in the match, but he records like a minute of it. And then I guess he found the spot that he wanted. He's like, all right, stop. And he hits stop, and he puts it back, and he's trying to play it in frame by frame. And I never forget it. There was a wrestler in the corner, and he's got frame by frame. I got to take my glasses off in case I accidentally connect. And literally, frame by frame, I see this. Like this. And I see it's fake. I refuse to accept his answer. He was insistent to show me that it was fake. I hope all of you by now have seen that original footage from 1985 that I put on this YouTube channel about 15 years ago that I recorded myself on 1985 from all the TV shows. You want to get an idea of how big Hulk Hogan was at that time? Go watch that vintage video I put up 15 years ago on this YouTube channel. In real time, I recorded that. And you see adults in the street. Is wrestling fake? Yeah, let Hulk Hogan. You think what Hulk Hogan is doing is fake? Just go watch it. And you'll see grown adults, 30s, 40s, and 50s, convinced that it's not fake. So, there was an innocence back then. The innocence is gone because of what you have online now. And honestly, never let the internet wrestling community be the one to judge how good or how bad somebody is. Go based on here and on here. I don't have anything written down tonight. I could talk for another hour about this, but I've grown up for 40 years, more than that, if you actually count the late 70s, even though I really don't, because Hulk Hogan really wasn't that big on TV. I mean, yeah, he was managed by Blassie, in 79, but, the thing is, he really wasn't the big mainstay on WWF television at the time. It was 84, 84 is when it started. But I lived through it all. I was a Hulkamaniac. And I wish he would have handled his final years a little bit differently. Just sad to see him go out this way. Really sad. Sad. It's sad. Okay. Yeah, listen, guys, come on. Look what I still have. Come on, all the photoshops that we did over the years when he claimed that he was gonna be in the Rolling Stones, when he claimed he was gonna be. I did these photoshops like more than 15 years ago. You know, we had a lot of fun ripping on Hogan. That doesn't mean we didn't enjoy the time we had. I loved talking about him. We probably talked about him more than any other wrestler ever on the shows. We laughed at all that stuff. You know, again, I regret that we never launched HulkHoganIsFullOfShit.com like 15, 20 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, we would have launched that. And then we got a threat. Don't do it. You'll get sued from Hulk. Don't do that. And we didn't have money. So Kev and I like, nah. Kev's like, don't do it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. We were going to launch 2 websites at that time. And one I'm going to get ripped apart right now, but that's fine. We were going to launch www.HulkHoganIsFullOfShit.com and post all the claims that Hogan has made over the years. And by now, that would have been legendary. And at the same time, we were also going to launch www.uglydivas.com. And we were going to post pictures of nothing but ugly divas in wrestling. Mae Young was going to be the poster child of it. But Mae Young was a very beautiful woman when she was younger. So, but we didn't launch either one. And just a really sad time, man. It's just a really sad time. And, you know, for those out there, again, please, my words will be left on deaf ears, but please stop ripping the people who you do enjoy because they're paying tribute. Stop thinking that they're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You know, some people do love this man. You know, some people do know him personally and feel otherwise than what you feel. And respect that. You may not like it, but respect it. There's a lack of respect now. And I'll say this, it's very sad to see some people who are not paying tribute, who did care about Hulk, and they're not paying tribute out of fear of backlash and also to upset certain people who dislike him. And there are people out there. Okay, we shall move on. Hoof-hearted says, give me a brother one final. Oh, yeah. Brother. I used to be able to do an awesome Hulk Hogan impersonation. I can't think about it, but, you know. Listen, I'm going to continue. All the impersonations will continue doing on the shows. Nothing changes. Just the only problem is we won't get any new material right now. That's the only problem right now. Right now, I'm not getting any calls from above say, hey, DT, you guys see what Hogan is telling us up above? What a fucking liar. He's claiming he did this, brother. So we're not going to get any new material, unfortunately. But I will say this. You're gonna see some people bring out some stories about Hulk Hogan personally that you probably never heard before. And for those who hate him, it's not going to change their views. And for those that, you know, wanted, you know, to hopefully find a little bit of redemption, I just think sometimes you got to forgive. There are some people who sin. And I'm not trying to be religious right now, but there's some people who will sin. And sometimes you got to just forgive. You know, forgive, you know, be the better person. And there's nothing wrong with that. But just because you support someone who is flawed doesn't mean that you condone what they did. We live in an imperfect world. I absolutely, in my lifetime, have said some awful things. Yeah, never on camera, but I could honestly say that those words don't cross my mouth for decades. because I realize younger, although misguided, you know, when you get into an argument with someone, you want to try to find the worst thing you could possibly say because you want to maximize the insult. If I was skinny and I was arguing with someone who was heavy, and I'm like, look at you, you fat bastard. The fuck, you know, like if I start making fun of their weight, it'd probably be the biggest dagger you could give. You know, because that doesn't mean that I have any issues with fat people, but I'm just using that because I know I'm maximizing my insult. And unfortunately, that bleeds over to race, it bleeds over to religion, it bleeds over to sex, to whatever, sexual preference. And people do it not because they hate that group, but because they want to maximize the insult. And unfortunately, that's just that in ways you could understand why the person says what they say, but it doesn't make it better. And that's why I stopped. You know, back in my 90s, you know, I would say some things. You get into a road rage incident with someone, God forbid that someone wasn't a fat Italian white guy like me, I probably would say something that if there was a camera phone, yeah, I'd be paying the price. But you learn from it. You grow. You try to mature. I hope in my last bunch of years that I've kind of matured and grown a little bit. Some people don't like that. I'm still politically incorrect in a lot of ways. But, you know, you got to understand why things, you know, you may not have that in your heart, but you have to understand why it's wrong. And I think that's why so many people were upset at Hogan, because he never understood why it was wrong. I think that's how a lot of people felt, including me. That's why I always said passive racist, because I don't think he truly understood that you don't have to have hate in your heart, you know, to be a passive racist. And I think that's why so many people were upset about it. So, but thank you again, Hoof. Brother. Jimmy Fingers, what's up, Jimmy? Austin said his head and physical condition was not in the right place, but Austin versus Hogan is that one match we never got in the end. Take the crowd away from Hogan Andre, not a great match. Crowd would have still went banana for it. Yeah, listen, when I used to do the early days of the Minority Report, we had a co-host, Dave the Genetic Freak, and Dave would argue with us that WrestleMania 3 Hogan Andre was one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. He says, look at the work rate. And I understand his argument. He's more about Meltzer ratings, but for me, it was all the years of Andre. I mean, when I grew up in 79 and seeing Andre as this larger than life, I got to see Andre live at the Ridgewood Grove Arena once. I saw him in the Garden, but the Ridgewood Grove Arena, I could almost touch him. That's how close he was. And he was beloved. And to see him turn and join Bobby Heenan and then fight Hogan, and Vince did a great job convincing us that Andre was undefeated, even though he wasn't. It was the magnitude of the match. That match is one of the biggest WrestleMania matches of all time. 93,000, I know it's not an official number, but there's a reason why 93,000 people showed up. It wasn't Steamboat Savage, guys. Not throwing shade on them. Trust me, I could only give you based on my surroundings at the time. We wanted to see Savage Steamboat. But a lot of that storyline also involved George the Animal Steel that got kind of hokey at that time. You know, Miss Elizabeth. So, you know, I don't remember people saying, oh, I'm watching WrestleMania 2. Everybody was Hogan Andre. It was the biggest thing. Like I said, look at all the fucking flashbulbs when Hogan slams Andre. I said this on Patreon Thursday. The two biggest camera moments that I remember, three camera moments in my lifetime of watching wrestling, 3 moments where I never saw that many flashbulbs was, number one, Hogan Andre, the body slam WrestleMania 3, Jimmy Snuka when he's on top of the cage, when he splashes Morocco and he dives off, and Triple H when he returned to the Garden. If you put them in super slow-mo, you will not believe how many flashbulbs go off. It's crazy. That match was storyline. that is the greatest example of a storyline that didn't need a good worked match. It told the story. It told the story about an extremely heavy giant that was always good, that is now bad and undefeated. And Hogan was very threatened. And at one point in the match, we thought Andre won. Remember Joey Morella? Andre gets up, thinks it's 3, and it wasn't. I swear to you, not exaggerating. I taped that night. I think I still have the VHS tape somewhere. And I watched over and over again in slow motion Joey Morella counting the 3. When I went to school, the next day or two after, whatever it was, everybody was talking about, he counted the 3, Andre should be the champion. And Vince, to his credit, picked up on that, and that was a big controversial thing coming out of WrestleMania 3. We got to see Austin Hogan for a very short period of time in a match. I don't remember what date it was, but I did cover it on the history show. If I remember correctly, it was the NWO versus Austin, and I don't remember the other 2 opponents. It might have been Angle or Rock or something. It was NWO versus Austin and 2 other guys, and Hogan and Austin were in the ring for about 10 to 15 seconds. That's it. Roderick says Austin and Rock. I kind of remember that. So they were in the ring for a very short period of time. Who would have won? If it was WCW, Hogan would have won. If it was WWE, probably Austin. Probably Austin. Or you could have had Hogan win because of interference from Scott Hall. I could have seen that. Could have definitely seen that. Some fantasy matches never happen, and it's sad. But I was thinking about this the other day. There was I can't remember who it was. There was an opponent that I don't know if it was for Hogan. It was for Hogan, but there was an opponent. I was like, holy shit, we never got Hogan versus so and so. I can't remember who it was right now, but I'll remember. I'll let you know on the next show for sure. Thank you, Jimmy, for that. Rest in peace, Hulk. Rest in peace. Hey, here's a name from the past. I don't even need to, I know the name's cut off on the screen, but I know who this is. The mayor of Dinosaur Island, Landry. If Real American Song wasn't available, what early 80s rock song would have worked for Hogan? I tell you, Eye of the Tiger worked great. Survivor told WWF stop using it. I think that worked great enough. You know why? Because it was Rocky III vibes. You know, the first beginning of Rocky III. You know, I always remember the music as far as Rocky III. I mean, besides the regular Rocky music. But the 2 songs I always remember from Rocky III is Eye of the Tiger by Survivor. When we're watching Rocky win some of those matches, but Mr. T is winning some bouts and, you know, Mickey is in the crowd, like getting concerned. Mr. T, you know, I want him. And that awful song by Sylvester Stallone's brother, Frank Stallone. I don't remember what it was. It was like pushing it. I don't know. He was in the gym, and my favorite scene, besides obviously Hogan, but my favorite scene from Rocky III is when there's like a saxophone part of the song, and you see Sylvester Stallone like on an exercise bike, just hanging out, and you see Mr. T doing, I think, like pull-ups, and he's like, and it just, you felt it right through the screen. It was spectacular. But Eye of the Tiger was a big song in Rocky III, so when Hogan came out for it, you felt it, man. That was a major song in 1984. That was a major song in 1984. Yeah, pushing it. Yep. I had a feeling that's what, pushing it, get ready for a fight, pushing it all night. Watch that scene with Mr. T again. It's legendary. But I would have stuck with Eye of the Tiger. That would have been great. I tell you, you know, the matches he had against Bockwinkel and AWA, is a beautiful thing to watch because how bad Vern Gagne fucked over the fans. I mean, you know, it was very rare to hear fans chanting, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You rarely ever got to hear that in the early to mid 80s. But he kept doing these bullshit finishes with Hogan and Bockwinkel. It was even a time where the fans thought he won. And then, like, they said, no, they reversed the decision, and no, this happened. And it was like 2 or 3 times. And because Vern Gagne, it was like a drug addict. Like, he realized, holy shit, look at how many showed up. I got to fucking tease them. I got to do it again. So they teased the major victory, and then, no, we'll do another rematch. And then the rematch happens again, and Hogan wins, and they reverse the same. We'll do another match. And Hogan goes to Japan, I think. And then Hogan's like, I ain't coming back. AWA fans, man, I'm serious. You go watch those matches. Even if you're not a Hogan fan, you'll feel for the AWA fans. I watched those when they went down, and I was like, ooh, Vern, you fucked your company up. If there's like a moment for a company that you know you fucked yourself to the point of no return, it was that moment. Because if Hogan would have won the title, obviously would have wanted more money from Vern, but could you imagine Hogan defending the AWA World Championship, doing a tour for the AWA? They could have made so much more money. And the magazines would have covered it. The magazines were all into Hogan at that time, and Hogan started to get buzz in Hollywood. Unbelievable how Vern Gagne screwed his company over, man. Really. AS 7607, she is shattered over losing Hogan. He was her favorite wrestler for 40 years. How the fuck could you support a racist? What's wrong with you? I mean, how could you do that? You're a racist too. You see how stupid that sounds? I mean, Hogan was a human being like all of us. Yes, many of us do not use the N-word. Many of us do not have the flaws that some of our larger-than-life people we follow. But we live in an imperfect world, and humans are imperfect and sometimes do very, very stupid things. But you always want to give them a chance for redemption. Look at who's the boxer, the fighter? Who's the one that's in jail right now? His young nephew, I'm drawing a blank right now. His young nephew was groped by a man, and this guy decided to grab a gun and try to shoot him and shot the wrong person. And now he's in California. Cain Velasquez. Thank you very much, Roderick. Michael. Cain Velasquez. That guy will be out of prison soon. And Cain Velasquez coming out of prison, he will be celebrated. He will be labeled a hero. And he will demand forgiveness. And we hope that in his errant ways that he will be redeemed. Now, he could come out of prison and do some fucked up shit in different ways. We don't know. But my point is that, you know, you always want to hope that somebody can be redeemed. And I think Hulk Hogan was a very imperfect person. Didn't do anything criminal, you know, even though some people feel they got ripped off from him over the years. But, you know, you gotta, you know, people just make huge mistakes. Some people handle it like a champ, and some people put their tail between their legs. And I only bring up Cain Velasquez is because when that man gets out of prison, you watch how the IWC treats him. And although people feel bad for him, that guy almost killed somebody. And, you know, think about that. You know, regardless of the circumstance around it, he almost killed an innocent person. You know, if you would have whacked the other person, you know, I might be saying something other ways right now. But no, look, Hulk Hogan was an imperfect person. And that's why I criticized him so much over the last 15 years. I hated that he was imperfect, but I understood and accepted that he is imperfect. I've accepted over the years some of my favorite baseball players have flaws. Some flaws not so serious, some flaws very serious. Some of my favorite football players of all time. Look at Lawrence Taylor. Probably my favorite football player of all time, Lawrence Taylor. And look at some of the problems he had in his lifetime. You know, in latter years, you know, he has kept himself in the right direction. You know, we got to realize that, you know, people do make mistakes. You only hope that they have what's the right way to put it? They have turned themselves around, that they have, you know, learned from their mistakes. They may not forgive the way we want them to forgive. There's some people out there that wanted Hogan to go on his hands and knees and beg everybody for forgiveness. My God, do you remember last Monday? I joked last Monday that I said if Hulk Hogan has to go in for surgery, I said, wouldn't it be something if all the doctors are black that save his life? We said that last Monday on the show. We were joking around about Hogan in the hospital. And I said, you know, wouldn't that be something if all the doctors have to save Hogan are all black? You know, just to show. I mean, after 10 years, we still crack jokes like that. How crazy is that? We said that last Monday and he was still alive. That's how hard people took what Hogan did. It's a shame. It's a shame. And Ric Flair, you know, I don't want to say he's next, but you know Ric Flair doesn't have that much time left. And Ric Flair, you know, it gets really... Actually, this might be the next controversy, guys. Which was worse? Hogan saying what he said or Ric Flair, you know, exposing himself to airline attendants? You're going to see people do that. And you say to yourself, you know, wow, AEW has that much hatred for Hogan for what he said, but they brought Ric Flair in knowing that he exposed himself to airline stewardesses. You know, am I missing something? But I'm saying you see where this goes wrong quickly. That's why sometimes if you don't want to forgive someone, fine. But respect those that do. AS7607 accepted Hulk Hogan, as imperfect as he was. I accepted him, although I wish he would have redeemed himself a little bit more. So, okay. Jimmy Finger says he forgot we never got Flair and Hogan at a big event in the WWE either. I'll never understand why Vince pivoted away from that at WrestleMania 8. He would have rather seen Piper get that spot over Macho Man. The reason why Vince was focused on Macho is because he was looking at the bigger picture, further ahead. Ric Flair, trust me, when he showed up with the Real World Championship, Bobby Heenan brought him out, it was like fantasy for me. Because I was like, holy shit. You know, I grew up, and we talked about this on a history show like a week ago. I grew up watching the WWF. But when you would hear in the magazines that Backlund was going to fight Nick Bockwinkel, who is the AWA World Champion, it's like, holy shit, it's a fantasy match. He's going to fight Harley Race. Oh my God, it's a fantasy match. He's going to fight Ric Flair. You never saw that. Two promotions like that having a match. And it always ended with bullshit. But when Flair came into the WWF, it was like, wow, the match we always wanted to see. Flair, biggest star in the NWA for all those bunch of years. And now you got Hogan. Finally, the two are going to clash. And Flair, I just felt, in my honest opinion, I don't know. But growing up, again, you had to live through it to understand it. Growing up at the time, the vibe that I always got was that Vince McMahon looked at Ric Flair as in shape, but not chiseled. You know, like having the blonde hair, but not like the guy that would go at the beach and all the women would turn around and look at. I think that visual did not really, attract Vince McMahon the way he did. Like, again, I don't think Vince looked at Ric Flair and said, oh, he could be the focus, the number 2 in this company. Even if he feuded with Hogan for 6 months, I just felt that, yes, he became the World Wrestling Federation champion, but I always felt that Vince wanted more larger-than-life characters. And, like Flair was great in the ring. But if you remember when Flair would do the face bumps, it was always extra animated in the WWF. In fact, I remember when one of the video games came out and he was in it, and all you would do is just keep doing the face bump over and over again. You just flop down over and over again, over and over again. I just always felt that Vince never saw the value in Flair as much as the NWA did. NWA was more about the wrestling side of it, and Vince was more about the entertainment side. That's why, they did the little controversy with Miss Elizabeth and Flair and the Photoshop. It wasn't really a Photoshop, but, the point is, I think that's how they developed the controversy. So I just felt Vince never looked at Flair at that value like NWA did. It's my honest opinion. We'll never know for sure, but that's my honest take. And they were looking at Macho as, longer term plans. Macho was very committed to that company. And no, I don't believe Macho Man Randy Savage in 1984 could have pulled off what Hulk Hogan did. Macho Man was still a heel, not proven to be a babyface, was not branching out into Hollywood, was not the cover of magazines, was not featured on Johnny Carson, was not, rubbing elbows with a lot of celebrities, did not have become buddies with people like Sly. It was not at that point. So bringing him in because he had the look and he had the charisma, but he didn't have the connection. And you were not going to put Randy Savage in the rock and wrestling thing. That wouldn't have worked. So no, nobody could have done what Hogan did. And that's not the prop up Hogan. No one at that time. I looked plenty of times over the years on all the rosters available. There was nobody. The only person possibly could have been superstar Billy Graham if he was 10 years younger. Maybe the superstar, because he did have some Hollywood appeal. But that would have been a lot more difficult because you know what the problem is? Superstar Billy Graham wasn't about America, USA, the red, white, and blue. Real American. Yeah, he was a real American, but it wasn't patriotic. Everything about Hulk immediately became patriotic. When he beat the Iranian, he became a patriotic superhero. That's what the difference is. Nobody else would have been the patriotic superhero that the United States needed at the time. They were very into superheroes at that time. So thank you for that. And he says, Hogan slamming Andre in 1980 on Saturday TV in Shea Stadium was perfection. Andre was in so much better shape. And the slam at WrestleMania 3 was looked hard on Hulk. Well, that's what made it so much better, in my opinion. If you look at the slam at Shea in 80, it's very matter of fact. It was a big deal. I mean, the crowd buzzed whenever Andre got slammed. But, it was not the focal point. When Hogan slammed Andre at 3, you look at him, listen, the funny thing is, what should be more revered, but isn't? When Lex Luger slammed Yokozuna on the USS Intrepid in July 4th of 1993. You look at the size of Yokozuna. It's almost not believable. You almost feel like Lex Luger body slammed a balloon. Yokozuna was so fucking big that when Lex Luger did it, you're like, there's got to be special effects added to this. That body slam might even be more impressive than Hogan Andre, but because of the magnitude of the storyline, and Hogan was a superhero. Hogan won the championship in 84. Andre was 87. That's only 3 years. That's only 3 years. We were still deep into Hogan. And just imagine that. Vince, despite the Hogan train, Vince figured out, Ted DiBiase, Andre beats Hogan with the twin refs. And he gives it to DiBiase. Anybody in their wildest dreams think that Hogan was going to lose the championship that quick? Remember, Bob Backlund held that championship for 5 years. Bob Backlund held that championship from 1978 to 1983. Iron Sheik had it for a very short period of time. But we were used to somebody having the belt for 5 years. So Hogan losing it when he did was very interesting because you would have thought, hey, no way that Vince is taking that belt off of Hogan anytime soon. And 3 years went by a lot quicker than you think. It may not have felt it in real time because you didn't have the internet. You didn't have, cable TV like it is now. You just had a very limited programming. Trust me, if we had the amount of cable TV that now that they, in the mid-1980s, Hogan Andre would not have done 30 million. But there was very limited television. And especially when you look at the time that aired, it's crazy. It's crazy impressive. All right. At any point of Bubba the Love Sponge's reporting on Hulk's dire health the last 6 weeks, did I believe any of it? When I first heard it, I didn't believe it. I thought it was very ignorant for him to put that out there after everything that happened with Gawker and, the controversy between the two. It felt more of personal attack than anything else. So I thought Bubba might have been exaggerating. But if you remember the next episode that I did, I brought up something that I found very fascinating. Nobody came out to shoot down Bubba. And what I mean by that is, like Hogan's wife said, he had some corrective surgery, and he like if you saw some of the reporting coming out, it was very I don't want to say vague, but it just seemed like, just come out and say it. Just come out and say it. I don't know where Bubba the Love Sponge got that. And especially with TMZ, TMZ should have had that fucking shit 5 minutes later, shooting that shit down and saying, we spoke to Hulk's camp directly and he had surgery to repair his neck, repair his back, and so whatever it was. And it came out very unclear. And you started thinking in fact, believe it or not, if you look at the following week, I even said on the show, I think I even wrote on a synopsis, we may actually, Bubba the Love Sponge may actually have been right. I don't know who got him that information, but if you remember last week when we heard that Jimmy Hart was telling people that he can't even talk, I don't know what, I think I know what happened. We talked about it last week. When my mother had valve replacement surgery on her heart about 6 years ago, they literally cut her from here all the way to her belly button. They call it cracking you open. I know that sounds awful, but that's how they described it to my mother. They cracked her open. They literally cracked her ribs open, her whole cavity open, to replace one of her valves with a pig valve. And what I think happened was, I have a feeling, I could be wrong, but I have a feeling we're going to find out that Hogan needed some type of heart surgery, and they had to really crack him open, and he got damage on his larynx because of it. Because Jimmy Hart was telling people last week that it was so damaged he can't talk. And, you don't just go in there for no reason. So I think it's either spinal or heart, and I have a feeling it's heart. I have a feeling he had heart surgery. I mean, don't take my word on it. I'm just taking from personal experience from my family. That's what I kind of feel like it could have been. But I believe sooner or later it's going to come out. You're going to get the autopsy results. You're going to get the coroner's report. More information is absolutely going to come out. That is absolute. So we're going to one day know exactly what happened. And listen, not trying to be a dick, but the way Hulk Hogan exaggerated things across his lifetime, would it be any different for Hogan's camp to exaggerate up until the day he passed? You know what I mean? Like, and here's another thing too. I saw Bischoff's tribute. Beautiful, beautiful. But if you notice, Bischoff himself really hasn't come out to say what exactly Hulk got done and what his problems were. He never addressed the Jimmy Hart claim. He never addressed some of those things. Some people in Hogan's camp kept it very, very vague. And, you know, look, is it their place to mention it? Probably not. But we will get the answer. We will absolutely get the answer sooner than later. We will find out. All right. Chainsaw Charlie, what do I think about AEW's tribute on Collision? I mentioned it earlier. To me, that was a TNT call, not a Tony Khan call. I think it felt a lot like Jay Briscoe, how his death was handled, but it was the opposite. AEW wanted to do a tribute, and Warner Brothers did not want Jay Briscoe mentioned, and then they caved in. I will add something that I didn't say before. Did anybody take notice of what AEW wrote on their Twitter? They never said the words Hulk Hogan. They said R.I.P. brother. Again, I'm not in any way saying that AEW has to tribute Hogan. They don't. Tony Khan hates him that much. Tony, that hate is unnatural. It shouldn't, but that's how he feels. Fine. Tony Khan stuck by his guns, didn't want to pay tribute to Hogan. Fine. I respect that. But I found it fascinating that the only mention on their Twitter said R.I.P. brother. As people use as a quote, say his name. How petty does it come across that you have to write R.I.P. brother? That wasn't trending. That wasn't something that the family put out there. That was, that I interpreted that, okay, we're mentioning it, but we're not mentioning it. Go look. That's just, listen, I'm giving you my honest opinion. You know, some people will like it. Some people will hate it. I'm just being honest. I'm just observant. And I found that very, very interesting. R.I.P. brother. All right. Police Squad. What's up? P.S. Cross got a rematch against Zayn at SummerSlam. Any prediction on what will happen? R.I.P. Hulk. Yeah, I find that interesting that they're getting a rematch. We are going to do predictions Monday night for SummerSlam. I'll be honest with you. I am a little bit mentally exhausted talking about Hulk Hogan. 3 hours Thursday, 2 hours so far now, and a lot of talk amongst friends the last 2 days. Biggest star ever in wrestling, whether you like it or not. No denying it. Biggest star ever in wrestling. Again, like I said earlier, the phrase that Conan was given for a long time, I don't know if he liked it or he didn't like it, but people used to say Conan is the Hulk Hogan of Mexico. And people totally understood what that meant. So, what do I think is going to happen at SummerSlam? You know what I would do, Police Squad? If the righteous are coming in, have the righteous come out and beat the fuck out of Sami Zayn. Have Cross debut his new stable, the righteous. Let Cross have his match with Zayn. I don't want to see Cross losing at SummerSlam. He lost in Saudi Arabia. Let him, even if it goes to a DQ, let the righteous come out and beat the balls out of Sami Zayn. I think we need something to go to the next level in this storyline. The storyline just feels like it's going nowhere. it just feels like you're going down a straight road. Like, you ever go on I-95 and you think the next exit is like 5 miles away, and then all of a sudden you see the sign, next exit, 68 miles. Like, oh my God, I got to go 68 more miles? Oh my God, that's too much. That's what it feels like. It feels like this is too much on a steady road. We need some twists and turns. John Cena is asking, who's the righteous? Look it up. Google it. Just type in Karrion Kross and the righteous. Chris Jericho's blocking my view right now. Okay, Chris. My finger's starting to hurt. Wow. Kross. Am I on to anything, Kross? The righteous. Let him show up at SummerSlam. Huge pop in Jersey if they get it. Give me the righteous. Give me what I want. Give me what I need. The righteous will be 10 times better than AOP. Devin Magnuson, he doesn't like Terry, but Hulk was the man. That's an awesome way to put it. When I watched that court case, his divorce, I watched the Gawker stuff. I watched Hogan in court, and he's talking about, like, Hulk Hogan. You're like, no, that was Hulk Hogan. That wasn't Terry. That's when I realized he became Hulk Hogan. He did not see, like, you know what's a great, I just thought about it. You know, it's a great fucking example, Macho Man. Look at the final years of Macho Man. Macho Man lived his final years as Randy Poffo. If you followed Macho Man's final years when he found his new love, that is a man who respected and loved being a Macho Man Randy Savage character, but he lived his final years as Randy Poffo. Hulk Hogan lived all of his final decades as Hulk Hogan. That's the difference. Hulk Hogan became Hulk Hogan. And listen, if we're being honest here, Hulk Hogan, revered as a superhero, larger than life, body slammed Andre, beat villainous people, real American, loves his country. Why wouldn't Terry Bollea not want to be Hulk Hogan? It's more of a psychological thing than anything else. Because when you believe that you're that superhero, then you forget where you came from. And that's probably part of the reason why he got stuck in the bubble. Again, his friends crying right now, that is 1,000% authentic. But they kept that bubble tight. They are absolutely responsible in many ways for Hulk shielding off all of that. They protected him and convinced him, you're Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan would, you live your life the right way and you're true to yourself. He's a real American. And I think that went to his head. It was easier for him to be Hulk Hogan than Terry Bollea. I don't know, Benjamin, if I would call them enablers, but, they were there to console Hogan. And to whatever Hulk Hogan wanted to do, they went along with it. And, there was nobody there to convince. Listen, I loved the Booker T interview with him from 5 years ago. Like I said, that's the closest you will ever get to an apology. But if you listen to that closely, you pretty much hear Booker T, telling Hulk Hogan indirectly, I know you're not a racist. So if you're not a racist, why would you apologize for, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you made a mistake. He did his speaking tour on the news outlets, 10 years earlier, 5 years early, excuse me, at the time. Why do you need to do it again? If the IWC can't accept it, then that's on them. I think there was enough people to convince Hulk Hogan you're not a racist. And was he a racist, guys? Honestly. Some people have said some pretty awful shit in their lifetime. I mean, was he really a racist? I don't know. You know, I saw that one part. I didn't like what I saw. It was terrible and disgusting. And I also say he must have said it many times before. It just never got caught on camera. And he could have said it many times afterwards and it wasn't caught on camera. But you look at everyday life and you don't hear about incidents. You don't hear about episodes. You don't hear anything. And yeah, it's like some people say, you know, as long as they don't catch it on camera, brother. I don't know. That's those two clips early on. Some people may interpret it that, oh, he put hip hop stuff on it to make it look like Hulk Hogan was into the hip hop community. Well, if you really look into it, Hogan was into hip hop going back to the early 80s. Hogan was a supporter of hip hop. But if you're around the culture, you start acting like the culture, but you're not the culture. That's where problems run in. Because a lot of people have always felt Hogan was always around people who said that word. That was one of the arguments early on. Hogan was around tons of people who said that word. So he didn't think he was saying it that way. Oh, yes, he was. He was angry. He was angry and he was pissed off at the producer for Brooke. And that's why he said it. If he would have been caught on video saying, yo, what up, ma? And people might have been like, this white boy talking about. And I don't think he would have been revered with that kind of hate. You got to listen to how it was said, and it was said very, very negatively. All right. Hollywood guy says the hate for Hogan is crazy. We need more forgiveness in our hearts. There is too much hate in this world. Hollywood, I agree with you 1,000%, but it ain't changing. It's not changing. You could get the most beloved person that everybody on all sides of this scope love. Ain't changing. Unfortunately, this is here to stay. The only thing you can do is surround yourself with more positivity. You know, block the noise as much as you can. Trust me, there's many people on Twitter who I mute. I don't block them because then I don't want to deal with people. Hey, I just realized you blocked me. Why did you block me for? I prefer to mute people. You put people on mute. You just don't see their shit on the wall anymore. There are so many people that I've muted over half the people that I follow because I just don't want to see the shit. I don't want to see the negativity. I don't want to see the constant complaining. They complain about everybody else, but they're the ones doing just as much complaining. I would just mute as many people as you can. And when you and listen, let's make this clear. Your wall, your feed might get quite boring, but at least you won't be succumbed with the amount of hate. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's not easy to change. It's not easy to change. Thank you for that. King Arthur, my favorite Black Sabbath album. I don't have a favorite album. Here's my love for Black Sabbath simplified. You may not know this, but I grew up huge into R&B music, disco, house music, huge house music, techno, hip-hop, freestyle, hip house, one of my favorite genres of all time. I grew up on Detroit house, techno. That was my thing. But I had enough friends who were into rock. The very first cassette tape that I ever bought in like 1978 or 79 was a double cassette by Yes, the group Yes. It was from 1970, and it was Fragile and Close to the Edge. It was a double cassette. And I think the main reason why I bought it was, wow, I'm getting 2 albums for one, for like $5.99. But one of my friends was huge into Yes. And at that time, they had Owner of a Lonely Heart. No, actually, no, that was 82, 83. So, no, my first cassette, I don't remember what song they had before that, but my friend was into Yes, and I bought Fragile and Close to the Edge. I mean, I think Roundabout was the song my friend was into. I'll be a roundabout. And it's very corny music, but that was when and then Led Zeppelin, then The Doors, then, Black Sabbath, and then even the Stones to an extent. And then you get into the 80s and you got the Scorpions and and Def Leppard and Rat and some of the others, Twisted Sister. And I became a Twisted Sister fan simply because of the music videos. Is that a Twisted Sister pin on your uniform? I'll never leave my memory. So I had a soft spot for fucking Jimi Hendrix. Holy shit. Jimi Hendrix was amazing. So when I went to grammar school, some of my friends were playing Crazy Train and some of the songs of War Pigs and everything. And I was like, this is fucking cool. It was just awesome sounding music. And what's beautiful about it is some of those songs came out in 70. Like some of those songs, if I told you they came out in like 77 or 1980, I think people would believe it. Some of those songs that you could actually say came out 10 years later and people would be like, okay. They were so good, but that's how I got into their music. And when the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors in 1982 were coming out to Black Sabbath, that was it. As stupid as this sounds, my favorite non-WWF entrance music of all time is the Road Warriors. I think it's the Road Warriors because the way they looked, the face paint, and their early years, and coming out to that music, it just fit perfectly. So when I finally started getting hooked on Black Sabbath, you had greatest hits. You go to a store, you want to buy greatest hits. Why are you going to buy 5 different cassettes where you could just buy one greatest hits and get all 7 songs on one? So my favorite Black Sabbath album is probably a greatest hits. Years later when I got into even like Jimi Hendrix, believe it or not, and I don't know how many of you actually ever saw this, but props if anybody did. In 1995, I think it was, I bought a Jimi Hendrix, or no, actually I take that back. I bought it in the early 90s. And I remember this clearly. In 1995, I put a Jimi Hendrix CD into my computer. Does anybody remember Winamp? What was the intro they used to say with Winamp? When you used to load Winamp, somebody will remember Winamp, and it would be like the Buffalo. There was some intro that Winamp used to do whenever you turned it on. But I didn't know that Winamp, you can play music CDs. I didn't know that the Windows player at the time could play music CDs. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Ghetto. Winamp, it really whips the llama's ass. So I put the Jimi Hendrix CD in my computer. All of a sudden, I look at my computer, I see all these psychedelic colors. I'm watching some weird video, and I'm listening to Jimi. I'm like, the hell am I looking at? Then I found out, I don't know what the search engine was at the time, but the Jimi Hendrix CD that I bought had a feature on it that if you put it in a computer, you could actually see like a video, like psychedelic colors and just objects and shapes. And I was blown away by it. And I'm sure there's definitely some YouTube video talking about it. There's definitely but some CDs had that at that time. So maybe it was called an enhanced CD. You could be very right, non-JPEG. But I wondered how many discs I had that feature. And I don't remember any others, to be honest with you. But that's how I became a Black Sabbath fan. In fact, it was Wednesday's news update we paid tribute to Ozzy Osbourne at the beginning. And I replayed my TP thing. Remember when during COVID, when everybody was hoarding toilet paper, I did my spoof of Black Sabbath, and I was talking about everybody hoarding TP, you know. So check out Wednesday's update. I don't think I have the clip available. Maybe I do. I'll check really quickly. I don't want to go off track here. Maybe I do. Maybe I do. What did I do? I hope everybody checked out the history show this week. That Jimmy Uso stuff at the beginning was fucking crazy, man. I don't think I have it available. Sorry. I thought I did. Yeah, no, I don't. Early this month, no. I don't have it available. But just check out Wednesday's news update. I actually posted the video on the channel members version here on YouTube, so in case you want to go check that out. But thank you for that. Who's this? Jimmy Fingers. Thank you, Jimmy. Crazy that we're just praising Ozzy's last performance a couple of weeks ago. Doesn't think anybody famous will have a better curtain call. Anybody remember Fat Man Scoop? Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Fat Man Scoop. If anybody goes on my Twitter, at Don Tony D, go in the search box. I actually went to a dinner party, and Fat Man Scoop was performing, and I recorded a bunch of video of it. And that motherfucker literally went to like Jersey and was on stage doing the very same performance, and he collapsed and died, which was awful. I think he was only like 46 years old, but it was awful. I mean, he was heavy. Not that heavy. I don't think he was heavier than me. But Ozzy Osbourne, though, you know, what an amazing way to go out. You know, I paid tribute on Wednesday, and I kicked myself in the ass after I finished the news update. Why? Because after I did the news update, I wanted to read a little bit more about Ozzy. And what I found was that on that last performance, they raised $170 million for charity. Just let that sink in. In his final month on this earth, he went out raising $170 million for charity. I mean, if there's any way to bribe yourself in heaven, you know, that's the way to do it. That guy, seriously, it's just amazing to read that. When I grew up, the only thing we ever heard was he bit the head off a rat or off a bat. And trust me, in the early days of the internet, we tried to find footage of it. There might be footage. I don't ever want to see it. But there's enough people who claim that he did. He was an interesting guy, man. But, you know, to be dealing with his health issues like he did, you know, and you're dealing with things like dementia and Parkinson's and stuff like that, and to put on that kind of performance, you know, it almost feels like, and I'm not trying to be religious again, but it almost feels like after that performance was done, it's almost like subconsciously, if he believed in God, it's almost like he was like, God, I'm done. I'm ready. I'm finally retired. And that was it. You know, that's the one thing about my dad, and that chokes me up. It chokes me up every fucking time. My dad has been dealing with some major shit. He's had cancer twice, had triple bypass, almost had the Widowmaker a couple of years ago. Is now dealing with horrible sleep apnea. And my father only knows one speed, and that's ahead. Whenever I post pictures of my dad, he's always doing work on something in his house. And even today, when I saw him, he came in, he went to Costco. He's like, man, I worked my ass off today. And I'm looking at him like, you know, you're 76 years old. You know, why don't you just sit down and watch some TV once in a while? And I always believe that the day, my father will take a couple of days off. My father will go to Florida once in a while. But I always felt that the day that he truly retires, the day that he says, I'm done doing all this extra work, I'm done doing all of this. I think he's going to leave us. There are some people who go into their 70s, 80s, even 90s that will not rest, that have to do something every day, because the day that they just mentally say, I'm done, they're done. I truly believe that way. And I think the same way with Azie. I think the minute he was truly done, he was done. And he passed. You know what's really, really awful? I mentioned this last week with Malcolm Jamal Warner. I was shocked at how many people who said to me, DT, I can't believe that comparison. It's so right. Malcolm Jamal Warner's death reminds me so much like Shad Gaspard. Then when I heard the rumors that he was on the beach with his daughter, she didn't go in the water, but he was on the beach with his daughter. I didn't even know about that part of it when I said that. And now it feels even more like what happened with Shad Gaspard. You know, he didn't go in the water to rescue his daughter, but he was playing with his kid on the beach and decided, I'm going to go for a swim. And the riptide took him. And that guy's been swimming for decades, great health, and a riptide still took him. It's crazy. It's crazy to see some of the shit. You know, that's why tomorrow's never guaranteed. You just never know, man. You just never know. Tristan is asking my favorite Hogan match of all time. Listen, for me, live in person, nothing will ever beat him beating the Sheik. It's a memory when you are around something so big. Even if you're home with 9/11, like when you're around something really big, you remember everything about that day. When I woke up and 9/11 hit, I remember what I was doing. I remember how cool the day was, how bright the sun was. I remember, you know, phones not working. I remember going to my office and people just standing in like delirium state, like not knowing what the fuck was going to happen later in the day. You know, just everything about that day I remember. And the night. When I went to the Garden, because of the results, you know, everybody coming home that night on the train, everybody was fucking pumped and psyched. Holy shit. He beat the Sheik. Holy shit. The next day, I had in my wallet for at least 5 years, I had in my wallet the results that I cut out of the Daily News from the Garden. Because whenever Madison Square Garden had wrestling, the Daily News would put the results up the next day or the day after. It would say wrestling, and it would show the results from the Garden. And I had cut out the results that Hogan beat Iron Sheik, and I had it in my wallet as a memory. And, you know, that night being there, I remember meeting up with my friends. I remember getting something to eat at Burger King. We go take the bus to the train and taking the train to the city and walking and, you know, everything about that night. If he would have lost that night, I would have remembered going with my friends, but wouldn't remember every little aspect of it. But for me, my favorite match of all time is against The Rock at WrestleMania. It's just, everything about it is perfect. The crowd, the emotion, the story it told, the commentating, everything about it. Everything about it. Larry says, poor Malcolm, his death was overshadowed by Azie and Hulk. Nobody cares about Chuck Mangione. Well, here's the thing. Chuck Mangione was 86 years old. He lived a long life. We're all going to go at some point. Chuck Mangione is a little bit past most people's time. You know, I mean, in the 70s, big hit, 80s, a little bit as well. So that's a guy that most people remembered but wasn't on their radar recently. So that's why, you know, he isn't getting as much press. As far as Malcolm Jamal Warner, no, a shitload of people, he got celebrated. Azie got celebrated. It's just that because most of the people that we follow on social media is wrestling, Hulk Hogan overshadowed everything else. But outside of the wrestling bubble, Malcolm Jamal Warner and Ozzy Osbourne were heavily, heavily tributed. And Chuck Mangione to an extent, but Chuck Mangione was just more of, like a 70s, 80s performer. And that's how I'll always be remembered. So let's see. Kevin says WWF had a house show at Aloha Stadium, a first for the company in 1991. And it was Hogan versus Flair. There are a lot of events with Hogan, Flair in the WWF. They had tag matches. Wasn't one of them Hogan and Piper versus Flair and Shawn Michaels, I think it was. I know I'm getting three of them right. I know Michaels and Flair teamed up, and I know Hogan teamed up with someone. But there are several matches. And the funny thing is, the matches are very similar to each other. I mean, am I lying when I say this? They collar and elbow lock up, and then Ric Flair gets Hogan in a corner and gives him a chop, and Hogan just no-sells it, and then Flair is going poosh, 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 and he's punching him, and nothing is happening. And then Hogan hits him a punch or two, and then Flair takes the face bump. Oh, no. Not Sid and Flair versus Piper and Hogan is another match. Absolutely. I believe that. But there was definitely a tag team match where Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair teamed up. That match was really cool because Shawn Michaels was still very, very young in his career. It was really interesting to see Shawn Michaels put in that match. There's definitely a match on there. Yeah, Flair and Undertaker teamed up as well. 1991. I remember that. Sean says Theo was one of his favorite characters on The Cosby Show. I watched The Cosby Show growing up. I wasn't as big of a fan as I was with Family Ties. But Theo was definitely a cool character on that show. I was never really into Bill Cosby. And I think the reason being is because my interaction of Bill Cosby's entertainment was his stand-up. Because we used to get a record or two and he would do stand-up and it was very, very vulgar. So Bill Cosby was more of stand-up comedy. And now he's on a TV show and he's wearing, a sweater all the time and, he's being all this lovey-lovey. I remember that and Jell-O push-up pops or something like Jell-O pudding pops. All those fucking commercials at that time. Jell-O pudding pop. I never really liked his character all that much. I think Theo was definitely a very good character. And what about Malcolm and Eddie? Bill Cosby absolutely did vulgar comedy in the 70s. May not have been as vicious as Richard Pryor or Red Fox, but Bill Cosby definitely had some adult entertainment. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't looked in probably years, if not decades, for it, but he definitely did comedy, stand-up comedy in the 70s. His comeback had to have been clean, because if you're going to rebuild that image, but VJ is asking, did I ever find it annoying that Triple H is inserting himself everywhere? He's an average talent who got ahead being Michael's only friend in 97 and marrying the owner's daughter. No, we need that one go-to person that has power in the WWE, and Triple H is it. Most people like Triple H. I don't think he got it the easy way to where he is now. He's worked his ass off. He might have gotten a little bit of political power years ago, but we need that one person in WWE who has power that we feel is on our side to an extent. Never fully on our side, i.e. his comments on another Evolution pay-per-view. I'm not trying to brag, but I told you for weeks. that Triple H is not into evolution as much as people think. For years, he was explaining to us why there wasn't one or another one. And then we have it, and yeah, it was amazing. And they should do it again simply because it was a great event and everybody enjoyed it. But Triple H, even in that media scrum, pissed off a lot of people because they didn't listen to Triple H the last bunch of years. But Triple H, it's perceived that he listens to the fans more than Vince ever did. You need that one person and not just a figurehead character on TV. You need that one person that everybody could go to and they feel like they're not being lied to. And Triple H is that person. Triple H was the right person to narrate that yesterday. There was, to me, I don't have any issue with Triple H. He's not perfect. I just heard Sonya Deville say that the Pure Fusion Collective name was awful. Yeah, we all knew that. But I don't think that was a Vince thing, right? I don't think it was a Vince thing. A lot of reminiscing of Hogan right now, a lot of reminiscing. Don't forget, Monday night after Raw, we will be doing SummerSlam predictions. We have 12 matches officially announced. They could add another one or two. I'm not sure that they will. SummerSlam will be 6 to 7 matches each night, 7 at the utmost. And if a 7th match is added, it might be an impromptu or it might be added on a Friday night SmackDown, but I don't expect it. Friday night SmackDown's the day before SummerSlam night 1, so you will get a important match or two on a Friday night. But we will do predictions tomorrow night, so I hope you could join me. I'll be live right after Raw, so look out for that. I will prepare everyone. We're not going to talk much about Hogan tomorrow night, unless some news comes out. Because like I said, we talked for 3 hours on Thursday that's available, and right now we're 2 hours and 40 minutes in, so there's plenty out there to get into. And, you know, like I said, I didn't want to sit here and give you his own full bio when he came up, you know, under a mask and went here and went to Memphis and this, that. You know, I just wanted you to hear my personal experience growing up with Hulk Hogan, you know, the focal point and why he was as big as he was and why, you know, we are where we are now. And, you know, I just wanted to share my personal memories, my personal feelings. Biggest wrestler to ever in wrestling in our era. There were obviously bigger names, you know, 60, 70 years ago. Bruno made many people feel he was a bigger star, but to branch out into entertainment, he's the one. He's the one. There's no denying that. You could ignore it and you can look the other way. Listen, you could treat it like Barry Bonds as the home run champion. You could acknowledge it. Or if you're really against the fact that he was into steroids, and you could look the other way. Right? You could, but don't continue this abnormal amount of hate, you know, because of it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you want to just, you know, put an asterisk, you want to just ignore it. Absolutely, that's your right. Don't have any problem with that. You know, treat it like others, but this level of hate is just, it's not good. It's not good. Nobody benefits from it. And at some point, you know, one of your faves, like I said earlier, is going to fall. And we want to, you know, listen, how many times do you see hate going across the wrestling community? Nothing is said at all amongst the wrestlers. And then all of a sudden it gets really directed, one-sided, and then a particular wrestler comes out, no names mentioned, and, you know, can we all just stop fighting and be wrestling fans, Dustin? You know, and it's funny, I'm like, Wow, you let that simmer for 4 fucking years, and now you're saying something? I mean, I get it. Better late than never, but nah, it's too far gone. I'm sorry to say it. This level of hate will never go away. They'll just find the next person to focus on. Who that person is, I don't know. This level of hate will never go away. The only thing you could do is try to avoid it. And there's enough positive people out there that you can surround yourself with. We're not forgetting what Hogan did. It's awful what he did, but, you know, he also did a lot of good. And, you know, I choose to remember that. The relationship that I grew with my grandmother because of him is something that I will cherish forever. I will cherish that forever. And listen, I should have said this earlier. I'll be very quick with this. One other reason why I'm very angry at Hogan. When Hogan did his crying campaign in 2015, I remember clearly that he wanted everyone to give him a second chance. Forgive him. Give him a second chance. And I was already blocked everywhere from him. And I had talked to someone who's friends with Jimmy Hart. And I was like, how am I going to get a message to Hulk Hogan where I'm blocked everywhere? And it meant enough to me at that time that, okay, you know, maybe he's really sorry about this. So I wanted to write an apology to him. This is a true story. And I still have the letter somewhere. It's in my computer. It's a Word file. And I talked to someone who was friends with Jimmy Hart. And I said to him, I said, can you do me a favor? I said, next time you talk to Jimmy Hart, just ask him, say, listen, if someone sent him a letter, a file, a letter, could he forward it to Hulk Hogan? Like, I didn't ask for a mailing address or anything like that. I just said, look, if you know, so my friend's like, yeah, I'll look into it. So like 2-3 weeks later, he drops me an email. He's like, oh, you remember you asked me about Jimmy Hart? He's like, yeah, I spoke to him. He said, yeah, send it along and he'll forward it to Hulk Hogan. I said, okay. So I wrote on Word, 4-page letter. And I wrote about my grandmother. And I wrote so many incidents of how my relationship was built, and it was around wrestling. And she got me into wrestling. I told the story about the Piper figure and everything like that. And I said, you know, I've been very, very rough on you. I said, I know I'm a nobody doing, you know, the webcast, the podcast. I said, but I was very rough because I was very disappointed and upset. Steroid thing, okay. But the comments about John Graziano, the stuff he said in the prison calls, the stuff, you know, with the Gorka stuff, the stuff with the word. I said, you know, you are asking for forgiveness. I'm asking if you can forgive me. I said, I know that you don't know who I am and I don't exist and you will never hear from me ever again. But I just wanted to tell you I am sorry. That's it. I didn't want to be unblocked. I didn't want any response. Didn't think I was going to get a response. But in my lifetime, I've written to enough people that I appreciate and got responses. I have some of them still. I just showed everybody recently that beautiful letter that Terry Funk wrote me. 2-page letter, Terry Funk. So I wrote hoping that I would get a response. But if I didn't, I just wanted to apologize for everything that I said. Because it may not have been him. It could have been a secretary. But somebody blocked me everywhere from his stuff. So I wrote this 4-page Word file. I saved it. I sent it to my friend. And I said, could you forward this to Jimmy Hart? And he forwarded it. So like 2 weeks later, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if he read it. Still blocked everywhere. You know, I wrote my address, my phone number, my email, just in case. You never know, brother. Maybe I get a phone call or a letter, something. Nothing. 2 weeks later, nothing. About a month later, I emailed my friend. I said, you sure you gave that to Jimmy Hart? He's like, yeah. He's like, why? I was like, yeah, I just never got a response. I said, I didn't think I was going to get a response, but never got unblocked, never got a response. Probably just deleted it. But, you know, again, it's just a part of who these people are. People are bringing up Mike Tyson. What an example. That's a great example. Look at Mike Tyson. Look at what he was accused of doing and maybe had done. And look at how he changed his life. And what's the difference also? A majority of people allowed him to make that change. He was going to make the change whether we wanted it or not, but enough people allowed him the opportunity to make that change. Did he ever publicly apologize for a lot of what he did? I don't really recall all that much. You change in your actions. Mike Tyson, it doesn't feel like he's in the bubble like Hulk Hogan was in. Tristan, I don't recall the Walker, Texas Ranger episode that Hogan was in. I tried to enjoy that show. I like Chuck Norris and I like Steve Austin, doing stuff on Nash Bridges, but I never really got into Walker, Texas Ranger. Never really got into it. Not a fan. I liked him when he was doing all the karate movies and everything. Him being a sheriff, a lot of those Southern type shows I was never really into, so. I do agree, Ultimate Fighter in the chat. I absolutely wish Kev was still here. That would have been a very interesting conversation to have with him. Somebody asked me on Patreon Thursday. I think Kev would have definitely acknowledged that Hulk Hogan is the greatest, biggest wrestler of our lifetime. But I also believe he would also acknowledge that he was not a huge fan of Hulk. Thought that Hulk was very disingenuous and was just very unlikable the last 10, 15 years of his life. Kev was more into Savage, was more into other guys. He would give Hogan his colors, without a doubt. But he would not be one of these that would just piss on his grave. You know what I mean? It would have been interesting. Absolutely, it would have been an interesting conversation to have. But remember, when I did that song, White American, 10 years ago, Kev hated it. Kev hated that when I did that, if people remember that. I don't even remember what I was doing, but I was just like thinking about what he said. I was thinking about his song, and I was like, okay, let me just change from real to white. And the lyrics I haven't listened to that song since I recorded it. And I was going to pull it today, but I was like, it's better off I don't. But I do remember the lyrics of the first phrase. And I remember playing it. Kev was like, that was fucking awful. It's a shame, man. But remember this too, and I'm not trying to get anybody down. Everybody that we enjoy one day is going to pass away. We don't know when. We don't know how. But it's going to happen. Just unfortunately, we never really truly prepare ourselves for it. And as we get older, it gets sadder because your childhood heroes are no longer physically here. We could watch video all night long and they'll feel like they're still here. But it's just a reminder that we all go. One day I'm going to go. One day you're going to go. And as we get older and our childhood memories go, it's not the passing of the torch. It's the passing of life that we're all going to be replaced. 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're all going to be a distant memory. If YouTube still exists and my fucking videos are still up there, I don't know who will have my account, but somebody watches this 30 years from now, you can see all you in the chat room, and most of you will probably not be here either. So it's just, as you get older, it gets sadder. And the age difference of the hate is pretty startling. I don't include people in the business. People in the business that did not like Hogan have very legitimate reasons to feel that way. But when you look at everyday fans, it's pretty wild to realize that most of the people expressing this bizarre hate are between the ages of 20 and 40. Between 20 and 40. And think about it. Hulkamania started 40 years ago. So if you're 20 now, that means if you understood wrestling at the age of 10, that would have been 2015. Hogan was already done. If you're 40 and you understood wrestling at the age of 10, that means you came around the time that the NWO was pretty much forming. So you yourself didn't even live through the superhero Hogan. And that's the one, if we're all honest, almost every tribute that's on TV all focuses mostly on 80s Hogan. Because a generation grew up with him. 30 million people watched it on Saturday Night's Main Event. A lot of those people are still alive. There might have been kids at that time, but now they're adults. So that's why it's so big and still mentioned today. It was a fun time in the 80s. I loved the 80s. But I think I loved the 90s even more. The 90s had a little bit of everything. At the beginning of the decade, you still had Hogan a little bit. And then you had ECW. And then you had the Monday Night Wars begin. And then you closed out the decade with the fucking Attitude Era. If we're really simplifying it, I mean, the 90s was a pretty awesome decade to be a wrestling fan. Roderick is asking, which version of Hogan made a bigger impact on wrestling? Hulkamania Hogan or NWO Hogan? Easy. Hulkamania Hogan. The reason being is because before Hogan, listen, it's a figure of speech, but you've heard this phrase and it's very annoying. When you'll hear somebody say, Hulk Hogan took wrestling that used to be in bars and small bingo halls and took it mainstream. I think even Triple H has made a comment like that. Wrestling was still underground. It was looked at as fake. It was not taken very, very seriously. You look at wrestling coverage before 1984, it was still just, like a guilty pleasure that some people enjoyed. It was very, very small. Hogan made it into a mega form of entertainment. It branched out into the music world, MTV, sports and entertainment. It revolutionized wrestling. Wrestling, 93,000 people for fucking main event that, if Meltzer gave it a work rate star, it'd probably be 1 or 2. NWO, Hogan was already larger than life. Hogan was already a superhero. Hogan made it cool to be like the bad guy. Piper was cool as a bad guy in the 80s, but it wasn't revolutionary where everybody was fucking going, for life, for life. That's what it was, for life. I mean, everybody wearing NWO shirts, having cliques, thinking that there was invasion. NWO was nothing like we ever saw, but everybody that was involved were already stars. So no, Hulkamania Hogan from the 80s took wrestling to a different level. It took wrestling to made a pop culture. NWO was more of a shtick for wrestling fans. So, and listen, you know what, Devin, thank you for that. Devin says he's not going to lie. He loved the TNA stuff. The TNA stuff wasn't that bad. The stuff with Abyss, remember? The ring. I remember those days, man. Some of it got very, very goofy. But look, even TNA's debut on Monday night when Hogan debuted, didn't he get 2 million viewers for when he came out and cut his promo? I think overall for the night, TNA did what, 1.4 or 1.6 million? That's pretty damn impressive going head-to-head with Monday Night Raw in January, whatever year that was. That was a big fucking deal. Some of the TNA stuff was good, but some of it was just, I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you this much. You know it's aged pretty well? Sting's feud with Hogan when Sting became the Joker. That's some footage that if you were not a fan of TNA at that time, you should go back and revisit that. When Sting started becoming the Joker and was feuding with Hogan, we played it on the History Show like a month ago when Sting was saying, Hogan, eat your vitamins. And he's shoving like handfuls of vitamins down Hogan's throat. And you could see Hogan is about to laugh, but he's spitting them out. And Sting was fucking great, man. Sting turned into a maniac at that time. January 4th. I remember that. January 4th. All right, we're going to start bringing this home. We're at 3 hours. I'm a little spent. This has been a hard 48 hours to deal with. We knew this day would come. We didn't think it would happen this quick. We were all focused on Real American Wrestling just to see what we were going to get the end of August. A month from now, Real American Wrestling was coming out. I don't know if we're going to see those Real American beer commercials anymore. I mean, it'd be kind of eerie to see Hogan in those commercials still. One thing that a lot of people have been asking, and I will answer this, people have been asking, like, who's going to get his assets? Who's going to be in charge of all of his projects? And as far as his projects go, his wife will definitely be the one handling most of that, if not all of it. But Hogan, I would think, has a will, and Hogan definitely left part of his fortune to his kids. I don't think Linda will have any part of it. One of the things that I'm fearing, and it hasn't happened yet, it's only been 2 days, but I'm fearing a confrontation with Linda and his wife now, Sky. Because Linda, if you remember, was not that long ago that she had that meltdown on social media, and you realize that she is alone. She's very, very lonely right now. And I guarantee you, she is waiting for Ashley Banfield, those rejects, to contact her. Linda, we'd love to have you on to give your memories of Hulk. And, it's almost like when Ric Flair came out and said he's the real world champion. Like, you don't want Linda to come. I'm truly Hulk Hogan's wife. I was with him for 15 years. I don't want to see that feud. And I got this bad vibe. We're going to see Linda versus Sky indirectly. I have that weird vibe, man. Remember this show if we start seeing that. I think it's only, and Ashley Banfield's at the top of that list. Ashley Banfield will definitely have Linda Hogan on. And listen, it's awful what happened, but I expect controversy. Okay. To bring this home, Franklin Tangelo, DT, love you, my man. Been listening since elementary school. He's now a young man and he wants to hear one title win I would reverse. One title win I would reverse. Now, I'm sure everybody would say David Arquette. I don't, because WCW was already fucked up at the time, and they were doing that because of the movie Ready to Rumble. And believe it or not, it didn't get as much negative attention as you think at the time. Not a good thing, but one title reign I would reverse. One title reign I would reverse. Vince McMahon is the ECW champion. I know he was trying to fuck ECW, and obviously I got a little bias towards ECW. I put that up as tribute, but Vince McMahon is ECW champion. Because that was the time when he was walking around with the fucking bandana on, and he was going, and he said the N-word on TV. What up, man? I don't know what the fuck that was. Vince McMahon is ECW champion, because I was like, man, I know you own the thing, and I know you're trying to run it to the ground, but what was he trying to prove? Yeah, the do-rag. Man, could you wait when Vince dies? Wow. I you know what? I think Vince will get more negative than Hogan. I still don't know what happened with him and Janelle Grant. My gut feeling tells me that Vince finally found his freak. When you hear about the P. Diddy stuff, you hear about these sex things, trust me, people that are nymphs that are into sex like that aren't always 250-pound blonde fat hicks from the South. You can have beautiful women, very infant women, very young women that are into shit like that. I don't know what happened. Doesn't mean that Vince is not a pig, but did Vince traffic her, or did she, is this kind of like an Eyes Wide Shut thing? Not, whatever those movies were, 50 Shades of Grey, and she got burned in the end, and, she mentally got destroyed over Vince using her. Is that criminal, or is that being played? It's not easy, but, even if we found out, even if proof comes out that Janelle Grant was just kinky, people still nail Vince McMahon to the cross. For Rita Chariton, for Ashley Mazzaro, he's accused him of ignoring, and you think about, Christy Hemme and, the controversy, we're not supposed to know about, and a lot of other things. Vince McMahon is a perfect example of a billionaire that has the money and gets what he wants and will put people in very compromising positions to get what he wants. It sucks, but it is what it is. So I would reverse the ECW title. All right. Let's take two more questions. Who hasn't asked one yet? Tristan's asking what I like more, Mr. Nanny or Suburban Commando. I liked Mr. Nanny because George Jefferson being in it, I always had a soft spot for him. Suburban Commando was okay too. I mean, we had some cameos in that movie that were pretty cool, but Mr. Nanny was interesting. It was a role that I did not expect him to take. Yeah, listen, some of you out there are supporters of Vince. Vince will definitely get praise from people in wrestling. And some of those people will get criticized for singing the praise. It is what it is. But listen, one thing I think we can agree upon as far as Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair, they made their beds. They controlled their destiny. They could have easily repaired and prevented a lot of what's going on. Hulk just chose not to fix anything. Probably felt it didn't need to be fixed. Vince don't give a fuck. Vince has everything he needs. And Ric Flair, I think, just, as long as he's got his inner circle and he's got a little bit of alcohol and money in his pocket, he's content. So, these three, made their bed. And they're going to deal with it. Simple website hosting, yes. DT, what are my thoughts on AEW's tribute to Hulk Hogan, or lack thereof? To simplify this, I mentioned this briefly earlier. No one is required to say anything. I believe the tribute on Collision by Tony Schiavone was at the request of TNT. I don't know if the elite dishonest media will come out and admit that. The fact that it focused on Monday Night Wars and it being on TNT, which was obviously a totally different company back then, I think that in itself tells me that it was a TNT decision more than anything. The fact that AEW's Twitter account didn't mention Hulk Hogan's name, but instead wrote RIP brother, which was interesting. But I also give Tony Khan credit that they took a stand and they didn't budge. To me, AEW did not tribute Hulk Hogan. Tony Khan did not tribute Hulk Hogan. I think TNT wanted a mention. Here's something else. I'll point this out. I know a lot of my podcasting friends thought they were on the pulse of this, but I'll tell you something that no one else did. Did you notice that the arena never got a graphic? Did you notice that Tony Shiovani was talking to us and the crowd had no idea what Tony Shiovani was talking about? AEW, in my opinion, did not tribute Hulk Hogan. TNT made the call. And it reminded me of the handling of Jay Briscoe, only reversed. And that's perfectly fine. If AEW hated Hulk Hogan that much that they did not acknowledge him, fine. I respect it. I don't agree with it because you're in the wrestling business and sometimes you have to acknowledge people that you did not like, but obviously was very instrumental of wrestling getting to the heights that it was, but they chose not to. And I'm fine with it. I'm not going to bitch about it. I found it interesting Thursday night that they didn't. But you could see that's obviously a Tony Khan call. Individual wrestlers pay tributes on their own pages. That's fine. People grieve differently. I saw some people giving heat to Adam Copeland today. Wow. You were friends with Hulk. You don't want to say anything because you want to please Tony? Aren't you going to say anything? People were bringing that to my attention. And I was like, hey, you want to know what? A lot of people grieve differently. And I don't think people should have to come out and cry and, mention something. People handle death differently. So I'm not going to criticize anybody. It's the people that have this abnormal amount of hate that concerns me. But I also understand that's a bigger picture, and that will never change. And, I think the most disturbing of the disturbed out there, simple, website hosting, I think the ones who disturb me the most are the ones who think, I don't want to call it virtual signaling, but the ones who think that they are the most etiquette and they're criticizing everybody else for, the way they see things, and they are the ones who are the most disturbed. The ones who think that they are on the right side of history and ripping everybody else for various reasons, they think that they are the moral ones and everybody else is the problem. And they are beyond mentally retarded. It's very dangerous when you have someone out there that actually convince themselves that they are the moral compass of the way they handle this. And I've seen some very bizarre ways. I've seen people donate money to the NAACP the last 48 hours. I saw people, mentioning other causes simply because they're black, as if, we're just rubbing it in Hogan's face. Somebody who, I'm like, what are you trying to do? Like, you think like Hogan's family is going to look at that and get upset at you? Like, what are you doing here? Like, do those things because you want to help people, not because you think a racist died. It's very bizarre, very bizarre. I will not be on that side of history. I will be on the side of history that I acknowledge that my childhood hero had flaws, some of them worse than others that I have idolized growing up. And unfortunately, he became the character, and he was surrounded by many people who convinced him that his path of life, the way it is, that in his heart, he knew what was good and right, and that at the end of the day, he only has to answer to one person, and that's our Lord above. And I think, that's his way, and I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. I was thinking about this earlier. I could only imagine if Michael Jackson died in 2025. He died in 2009. And I look at social media now, and I could only imagine how that would have been handled in 2025, especially if we found out that Michael Jackson was a Trump supporter. I'm not saying it's pro-Trump, but I'm just saying I could only imagine how different that would be handled. Oh, my God. There's people who died like 15, 20 to 30 years ago that I say to myself, you imagine if they died in 2025? Holy fuck. Would that be handled differently? Shit. I hate death, obviously, and I think a lot of you hate it as well. And unfortunately, we're going to come across it again, and it may happen sooner than you think. And, it's a part of life, man. All of us at one point, we're going to go. We just hope it doesn't happen anytime soon. So, all right, everybody. I think it's time for me to exit. If you were a Hogan fan growing up and you enjoy other podcasts out there, I definitely recommend checking out some tributes. I can honestly say I didn't really see a bad one out there. There's some pretty good ones. I will say this, though. There's one particular podcast, we won't mention any names, did a beautiful 2-hour tribute to Hulk Hogan and put like 9 fucking infomercials during their broadcast. And I'm like, can we go 1 week without Blue Chew? And then it's not like YouTube automatically inserted them. It was just like, you're in the middle of shedding tears. Like, hey, everybody, do you have problems getting hard at night? Maybe you should try Blue Chew. Not good. Not good. Tyrese Valeriano says his favorite segment was Hogan, Kane, and The Rock backstage. Oh, yeah. Are you ready for tonight? Of course I'm ready. Hey, you ready? And Kane. It doesn't matter what... That's when it was the Canaanites. And didn't he say, yes. Guys, perfect way to go out. I can't play the clip, we'll get hit with copyright. The Rock, Kane, and Hulk Hogan were teaming up, I think, against the NWO. Might have been against someone else. But Rock and Hogan are in the back. And Rock and Hogan are in the back, and Rock is reminiscing with Hogan about some of Hogan's foes. And he says, you remember Kamala? And he go like this. Remember Bundy? Hey! And then Kane shows up. And Kane is still wearing the mask that time. And, Rock is trying to, psych up Kane. You ready for tonight? And Kane looks at Rock and says, are you ready? And Rock is like, you bet you. And he's like, it doesn't matter if you. And the fucking crowd, I remember Jerry Lawler started laughing. And Kane says, the millions of Rock fans and the thousands of Hulkamaniacs. It was just, go listen to that. It's pretty funny because look at Hulk's reaction, because I don't think it was done intentionally, but Kane says the millions of Rock fans and the thousands of Hulkamaniacs in attendance and the Canaanites. And then Kane goes, what you gonna do, brother? It's awesome promo. That is worth a look if you never saw it. Hogan first returning to WWE was fun. It was fun because he had enough that he could still go, and it was enough time gone by for nostalgia. It was 20 years. Let that sink in. When Hogan won the championship in '84, he body slammed Andre. It was only 3 years after Hulkamania began. I know Hulkamania really started in AWA, but, But when the NWO came around, Hulk was around for 12 years, for the most part, since 84. But when he came into the WWE after WCW closed down, it was 2003. Hulkamania was 84. So we're 20 years. So somebody who was 10 was now 30. Somebody who wasn't even born is now 20. Somebody who was 20 at the time is now 40. So there was enough time for a lot of nostalgia, and he could still go. And that's what made the match with The Rock so special. A couple of years later was different. Mr. America got a little goofy. His feud with Shawn Michaels jumped the shark. Undertaker was interesting, but at that point, look, even Edge and Hogan were tag team champs, where they beat Billy and Chuck. That time, you kind of felt like, okay, I think we kind of done now. Then you think of TNA stuff. Obviously, the TNA stuff, that at some points were good, but by TNA, Hulk was pretty much done. And then it ended up the way it did. Funny thing is, if you think about it, remember the promo we played at the very beginning of the show? Hogan is talking about a lot of hip-hop stuff. It almost feels like when Hogan went to TNA, like that's where all the problems started. You think about Hogan Knows Best and you think about Impact Wrestling, it kind of feels like once Hogan was centered in Florida, that's where a lot of issues began. But I'm not blaming it on TNA at all. So, all right, everybody, I'm out of here. I will definitely be back tomorrow night after Raw. We will definitely have a fun show. I hope you enjoyed this tonight. For those that aren't the biggest Hogan fans out there, I hope you just forgive me for one night spending some additional time because of what transpired. I know this is definitely needed for some of you out there. Again, there's some very wonderful tributes out there from people who knew Hulk Hogan. I wanted you to have a perspective from somebody who lived through it, who was 10 years old when Hulk Hogan first came on the scene, who was 15 years old when Hulkamania was born, who lived through the 80s, the 90s. No disrespect to my younger podcasters out there that are doing wonderful tributes as well. But I wanted to be one of those who lived in New York, who ate, slept, shit WWF more by force because, it was regional, but lived through Hulkamania, lived through all the feuds, lived through everything that developed because of it. And, it's just a very sad day for wrestling, a very sad day. It was going to happen sooner or later. It happened. So, all right, everybody. Much love. I'm out of here. Hope you could all join me tomorrow night after Raw for the show, and we'll be back next Sunday. Wait. Whoa. I sound like The Rock. Whoa. How do we handle next Sunday? SummerSlam. What do we do? How do we handle that? I don't know if I want to do a live recap right after. Should we do a live recap right after? Maybe we will. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, maybe we'll do a live recap right after. I'm not doing one the night before. Not going to do back-to-back. We'll do a live recap for night 2. And we could talk a little bit about night 1 as well. So yeah, let's do that then. I will definitely put the thumbnail up earlier in the week so everybody's prepared for it. We'll do a live recap of SummerSlam right after it ends on Sunday. And we'll run down night 1. We'll run down night 2. And I mean, we don't have to put a ton of deep dive analysis into it. We can give our overall thoughts on what we witnessed. I do believe, the way I feel right now, that WrestleMania And SummerSlam will feel similar, but I think SummerSlam will be the better show. I don't feel exhausted going into SummerSlam. WrestleMania, I felt exhausted, like, get this over with already. This feels different. So we'll see what happens. But I'm out of here, everyone. Much love. I catch you all in the next one. Be well, and I'll talk to you all again soon. Take care, everybody.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a podcaster. For me to live any other way was nuts. To me, those goody-good people who worked shitty jobs for bum paychecks and took the subway to work every day and worried about their bills were dead. I mean, they were suckers. They had no balls. If I wanted something, I just took it. I ran everything. I paid the bills. I paid the host. I even paid the masked maniac. Everybody had their hands out. Everything was for the taking. We always called each other Goodfellas. You would always hear from somebody. You're gonna like Don Tony. He's all right. He's a good fella. He's one of us. But if you're part of my crew, nobody ever tells you they're gonna get rid of you. It doesn't happen that way. There weren't any arguments or curses like in the movies. See, your haters come with smiles. They come as your friends, the people who've claimed they care the most for your life. And now that's all over. And that's the best part. Today everything is different. There's lots of action. I don't have to wait around for everything like everyone else. Oh, I didn't get the vaccine? Fuck you, vaccine me. Oh, your delivery guy has COVID? Fuck you, feed me. Right after I moved here, I ordered egg noodles and ketchup, and I got spaghetti with meat sauce. I'm no longer an average nobody, while they get to live the rest of their lives like a bunch of schnooks. As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a podcaster. For me to live any other way was nuts. To me, those goody-good people who worked shitty jobs for bum paychecks and took the subway to work every day and worried about their bills were dead. I mean, they were suckers. They had no balls. If I wanted something, I just took it. I ran everything. I paid the bills. I paid the host. I even paid the masked maniac. Everybody had their hands out. Everything was for the taking. We always called each other Goodfellas. You would always hear from somebody. You're gonna like Don Tony. He's all right. He's a good fella. He's one of us. But if you're part of my crew, nobody ever tells you they're gonna get rid of you. It doesn't happen that way. There weren't any arguments or curses like in the movies. See, your haters come with smiles. They come as your friends, the people who've claimed they care the most for your life. And now that's all over. And that's the best part. Today everything is different. There's lots of action. I don't have to wait around for everything like everyone else. Oh, I didn't get the vaccine? Fuck you, vaccine me. Oh, your delivery guy has COVID? Fuck you, feed me. Right after I moved here, I ordered egg noodles and ketchup, and I got spaghetti with meat sauce. I'm no longer an average nobody, while they get to live the rest of their lives like a bunch of schnooks.